know that we a serpent. Bitch, I thought you knew this shit is so when we smoking.
Yo. Let's go. Saturday night. Little night crawling here. We're going to do Gladiator 2. What's up, gang? Good to see everybody. We'll get started in a second here. Let's go. Let's get it hyped up a little bit here. Come on. Come on, let's go. That's what I'm talking about. There was a dream that was Rome. It was but a whisper, and all you could do is reach out and touch it, and it was but a whisper. There was a dream that was Rome. What's up? Let's go over Gladiator 2. Just came out in time for the holiday, for the Thanksgiving holiday here in America. I saw it today. We'll be talking a little bit about Gladiator, right? It's a prerequisite for this. And also a few books, because surprisingly, there were some literary elements thrown into this film. And one of those was that they call the new Gladiator the poet. He's a poet warrior in the classic sense, sort of. He's no Kurtz. He's not even a Maximus. He's no, are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is that not why you are here? Spaniard. So there are a few things that Gladiator is great. The first Gladiator is fantastic with Russell Crowe. Who doesn't like Gladiator? That's one for the boys. Great film. I saw it when it came out. It wasn't a sleeper hit. I meant to put it was a surprise hit. It wasn't a sleeper hit. It was a surprise hit, though, and it was a monster. It tore up the box offices and all that stuff, and it won Best Picture and Best Actor for Russell Crowe. I like Russell Crowe. I still like Russell Crowe. Of course I do. We love Russell Crowe. We've done a few of his films here, and we've done a few streams on Roman literature, mainly the Catabasis. We've talked about Virgil and the Aeneid and the voyage into the underworld, and by extension, we've talked about, of course, Dante and the Inferno. And then I did a whole stream on Dante's Inferno. Tonight, I'll be talking about Gladiator 2 and Gibbon's decline and fall of Rome, and as well as we'll be going back to Virgil because it's mentioned in the text. In the film, it's one of the guiding themes in the film. But if you've never seen Gladiator, hopefully you're not saying yes. Gladiator is a fantastic film. It is one for the boys. It's a great movie, and this is also a film that came out pre-Big Nine. And it's one of the last really great movies that came out before. This is the end of the 90s, came out in 2000. One of the great pre-2000s era films when everything changed. And now we have a film that is sort of attempting to capture the magic of the first one. It's as my friend Jethro said, it's kind of a cash grab. But there are a few interesting things about this. First of all, just to start with the film, I was pleasantly surprised by the movie. I expected to go in and tear it apart because Napoleon, we covered Napoleon at this. Remember, we did Napoleon at this exact time last year. We did Napoleon, and then Dune came out, or it was Dune 2. So, I was expecting Ridley Scott to be insane again, and I still have some big issues with Ridley Scott's directing, because we had just done a stream on In Search of the Hero with Ridley Scott films. I got to take these out. I can't listen to myself. We had done In Search of the Hero with Ridley Scott. Of course, we covered Black Rain, a couple of other ones. I still think that Body of Lies is one of the underrated, really. I don't know what other people think about that, but I've always really liked that movie. It's again got Russell Crowe. It's got Russell Crowe and Leo in it. Oscar Isaac is also in that film. Body of Lies is great because it covers fake flags, psyops. It's a war movie, and I like, it's spies and espionage. I like those movies. And American Gangster, another great Ridley Scott film. The Scott-free productions, they work well. Tony Scott also was, made a lot of classic films. I just watched Deja Vu again the other day. Deja Vu is a Denzel, Tony Scott picture, as Jerry Bruckheimer says. What I like to do is watch pictures. Well, I expected to tear this one apart, and I really did think it was going to be awful, but I went to see it anyway. I like to see the movies. So let's talk about what this film has. Gladiator 2, stylized with the double I in there. It was pretty interesting. Next up, by the way, because I was going to cover a purely literary stream again, and next up I will be covering J.G. Ballard's The Drowned World. This will be a pure literary stream, only literature, and this is a great book. Eco apocalypse, future tech, inner space. So I'll be covering J.G. Ballard next. But tonight, let's talk about the movies. So, first of all, I figured that the film, this might have been from a trailer somewhere, I don't know, but I figured that the hero in this movie would be the little boy from Gladiator grown up, and I didn't know how they would go about it. Yo, what's up? There's DPH, Church of the Church of the Eternal Logos. We love our Church of the Eternal Logos. It's so much fun to talk in that accent now. You can watch anybody speaking in that now, and it's even more fun than it was. Shouts out to DPH right there, Church of the Eternal Logos. If you want to see, by the way, a lot of movie analysis that I've covered, go to Church of the Eternal Logos channel. All the homeboys here know about that, but go to Church of the Eternal Logos channel because we've covered like 20-something movies together. So God bless him and Jenny out there and everybody out there watching right now on this cold Saturday night. By the way, shouts out to Crispy because I was watching the weather in Belfast and I knew that the weather was going to be cold here because it was cold in Belfast. So it was 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So I knew it was going to make its way over here. Speaking of which, there is a new show that I've been watching on one of the networks about the Troubles, not Dairy Girls, which is put on by my friend from Queens. She's the one who wrote that. But this new show, which we can get into later, I guess. But let's talk about Gladiator 2. So I knew that the little boy was going to end up as the hero in this. And here's the thing right off the bat to know about this film. First of all, Denzel carries the whole film, and I'm a Denzel movie enjoyer. I like anything with Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, Nick Cage, Based Mel. I can watch anything that they're in, and they're sort of interchangeable. In fact, Denzel, and it used to be William Smith, were kind of interchangeable for these. There's only a set number of roles that these A-list people can play, and I was really happy to see Denzel in the movie, but he really does carry the movie. But here's the thing about the film. It was an unexpected role for him. It didn't go where you expected to go because Gladiator 1, I don't know why I'm shouting. Am I shouting? I'm shouting at you. Gladiator is it's a historical fiction. So we have Marcus Aurelius in there, played by Richard Harris. There was a dream that was Rome. It was but a whisper. You could almost reach out and grab it before it would fade away. Yes, and it's a great movie. It starts off, of course, in Germania, and then we have the fictional Maximus Decimus Meridius going through the hero's journey. And one of the really cool things about that movie is that really provided a counterpoint for this one is that Maximus does have visions. He lives in, it's set in Marcus Aurelius, so we're in the first 2 centuries AD in Rome. And DPH, for instance, has done streams on Marcus Aurelius, I think, and of course on he's done streams on Stoicism. And that movie is sort of guided by that because we have the Stoic Maximus who he was seeking revenge for the evil Commodus played by Joaquin Phoenix. That was really a breakout role for Joaquin Phoenix. And he's trying to, he's seeking revenge for the death of his family back in Spain. He is the hero of Rome. And it's a great movie because the hero's journey takes him into the underworld or the afterlife, but in that movie we see visions of Elysium. He even mentions Elysium. Then you are in Elysium, right? He mentions Elysium in Gladiator. That provides a counterpoint for this because one of the really cool things that I liked about this was that the hero, Hanno, whatever his name is, his name, the dude's name, the actor's. Okay, so here's my problem with this movie. Here's one of the big problems. There are two characters with Cal at the end of their name. So we have Pedro Pascal and Paul Mescal or something. And that automatically didn't confuse me, but I thought, why would you do this? We have the main character. I've seen him in one film before, which is the movie Foe. Is it Foe that I saw? Yeah, because we covered Foe, which was the Daniel Defoe. Okay, so that's different from Daniel Defoe. So Daniel Defoe did Robinson Crusoe, and then you have J.M. Coetzee who did the book Foe, which is about Robinson Crusoe. We covered that. And then there's Foe, which is a story about bots and am I a bot or am I not? It's like an Australian film.
I covered that one as well about a year ago. But this Irish actor playing the main character of this, my problem with this dude was this guy clearly thinks he's Jerry Butler. And we all know Gerard Butler, right? Things are about to get sporty. Gerard Butler in 300 has now become a kind of archetypal character, a meme. And I like Gerard Butler movies. He's another one of these actors I'll watch anything that he's in. But I was trying to think the whole movie, who is this guy trying to act like? Because it's clearly not, he's not playing a character that he sort of developed himself, is what it looks like to me as a former actor. First of all, he looks like Gerard Butler. And he does this thing the whole movie. This threw me off. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm a spurg for watching movies and performances where characters do this. But the entire movie, he's bobbing his head like this when he talks. And that is why I think I am not a speaker. I am not an orator. But what I think, he's bobbing his head. And then the other thing is, you know when you talk to a person and they are like trying to find you in the conversation, they're like, their eyes are trying to meet yours. Like if I'm talking to you and I look down like this, another person's talking, they kind of go like this and look. Well, that guy does that the entire time. Now I know I'm sitting here moving around while I talk, but I'm not playing a character in a film. So the character of the film, especially for playing a stoical character, would be solid. He would be rock-like. His movements would be purposeful. He would have an economy of movement. And this guy's always looking around. There's too much movement on the screen. Stop fucking moving the whole time, is what I said out loud while I was watching it. Now, I did go watch the film with a fun audience at 10:15 in the morning, and there were a few parts where people in the audience went, I'll just say it was a fun audience, they went, oh, damn, the bitch got a knife. And that was pretty good. It's good to watch films with an interactive audience rather than, okay. Like when I went to see Dune 2 and there were 3 people with sleeping bags in the movie in the rows in front of me. And I thought, wow, what are you doing? Are these going to be San Francisco people? There's going to be there's fentanyl down there and they're in sleeping bags. This is where they live. No, it was because they knew Dune 2 and they were hunkered down for the entire film. Well, the other thing is, before I get into the plot with this movie, that the writing is less AI than Napoleon was. They learned something from Napoleon. Napoleon was almost complete. I'm not going to sit here and tear apart Napoleon again because I did that for 3 hours before. But the Napoleon film was almost completely synthetic, and it had an unreal feel to it. It's not that it was unrealistic. For instance, the fact that Napoleon hated sitting down to eat. He was a general, and eating was a waste of time for him. So he set up a tent outside of his palace. Wherever he was, he set up a soldier's tent outside, and he would eat on the go. He didn't sit down. He wasn't known for sitting down to long Louis XIV type of meals, even though when you go to Versailles or when you go to any of these places. If you've ever been to Napoleon's tomb in Paris, it looks like a Nephilim is buried there. But it was just sort of sloppy. It was like a postmodern interpretation of a Napoleon. And I get it. That would work if the rest of the movie was in line with that, but it wasn't. It just seemed kind of like they let Joaquin Phoenix be some sort of auteur with his own character and do what he wanted, which is also strange because Joaquin Phoenix is very good in Gladiator. He's so unlikable in the movie. He's a really good villain. He plays a kind of unpredictable creep in the movie, and so by the time you get to the climax of the first Gladiator, you want him to go so badly, and you want Maximus to have his vengeance. Well, that speaks to the fact that the writing wasn't tight on in this one, because every time the main character speaks, he gives like 3 or 4 war speeches, and that alone is a problem in a movie. When you know, remember the speech that Brad Pitt gives in Troy, which is clearly has prominence in William Wallace's speech in Braveheart, right? William Wallace makes Bass Mel makes the great speech. Yes, thunderbolts from his arse, right? I am William Wallace. For a chance, just one chance. And he's riding his horse, and the horse is bucking, and he's going back and forth down the lines, and he's speaking, and it's not that it's very real or realistic, but it's very truthful. We get the energy of the moment, and the buildup matches the action and how it's come to be at that point. Troy is a solid movie. That movie came out. I remember we watched it. My family, we met up in Rome in 2005 for Christmas, and we were right near the Trevi Fountain in the hotel, and we watched Troy. We went out to dinner. It was Christmas Eve. We went out to dinner, and then when we went back to the hotel, we were watching Troy, and I remember that the speech with Brad Pitt, he has his Gladio sword, what would later be, it's kind of anachronistic there, but essentially his Gladio sword, and he says, "Eternity, it's out there, take it, it's yours," and he like flips the sword. Well, that's cool, because it's very difficult to do a war speech in a movie and have it not be disingenuous or not have too much buildup just because of the moment. So that's all sort of taken from Kenneth Branagh's Henry V, from Henry V itself, right? One of the great war speeches of all time, which is the St. Crispin's Day speech, right? Well, the Troy movie kind of flips that and gives a huge buildup to the invasion of Troy, and has a short speech where the characters and Ajax is launched onto the shore, and then the Trojans invade, the Greeks invade Troy. Well, that movie, again, has its provenance in Gladiator, because Gladiator really kickstarted what's called the Sword and Sandals epic. Now, we all know about this now. Sword and Sandals epics were incredibly popular in the 60s. There were a number of films that were biblical films, or based in a sort of biblical etymology in terms of the film language. I mean, we had, of course, the most famous is Ben-Hur. We had the 50s and 60s, and we had Ben-Hur. We had the Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston. Alaska, cold, barren, wasteland. And you had a bunch of these movies, which were, Richard Burton. We had The Robe, a bunch of those movies. And then they sort of went away. And then leading up to the Big Nine, we have Braveheart. And Braveheart truly was a surprise hit. Braveheart, in 1995, I went to see Braveheart with my dad when it came out. And when we went to see it, I remember my dad saying, "We're going to see a movie called Braveheart." And I was like, "Oh, sounds good. What's this movie about?" And he was like, no, it's a war movie. It's William Wallace. And I was like, sweet. So we went to see it, and it was awesome. Braveheart is everybody knows Braveheart, right? So when we went to see it in the cinema, it was like the Saturday. It was the immediate Saturday after it opened. There was nobody in the movie theater, and then it sort of built, and then it eventually, like Gladiator, but before it, won Best Picture, Best Director, etc. And not that those are the metrics, but I'm just saying that it was a recognized movie. But it wasn't a Sword and Sandals movie. It was a medieval movie. Who is this person who talks as if I should care what he thinks? Because it's full of Scots, right? Patrick McGoohan. Great movie. Sophie Marceau. Even the techno that came out of Braveheart was great. Remember For the Love of a Princess, DJ Sakin and Friends? ATB. There's a lot of trance made after Braveheart that was great. Yeah, Christian says Braveheart is top 5 best movie ever. Braveheart is fucking so sick, dude. The interesting thing, as a side note that I'll say about Braveheart, I, like many other people, am related to Robert the Bruce. Robert the Bruce is my, to the 27th great uncle. His wife, Marjorie, He had a second wife, Marjorie, and I don't think he had any direct male heirs. But through my grandmother, I'm directly related to Longshanks. And so I liked the movie, but what I didn't like was the story that they did with Robert the Bruce, because, of course, it wasn't William Wallace who did many of the things in the movie. It was the Bruce. There's a great book by Randall McNair Scott about Robert the Bruce, which is fantastic. There's also an epic poem called Robert the Bruce, King of Scots, both of which are fantastic. That's a Scots epic. But those, it was a great adventure movie, one for the boys, and a long form epic that really also kickstarted the long movies are standard about 2 hours, and Braveheart went so long that filmmakers started to make movies, not that they were uncut, but really sort of explored the space, as they say, with films. And then eventually we get Gladiator. Gladiator, again, was another surprise hit. When it came out, not many people were expecting it to be a hit. Russell Crowe was a big actor. He was a famous movie star. He'd been in The Insider and a bunch of other films. Of course, he was in Romper Stomper. But you know, it was an epic in ancient Rome. It just wasn't the time. It wasn't the thing that was popular. Well, it became hugely popular, and again, that sort of galvanized the movie industry into something else that they could grasp. And then we had a bunch of Roman movies. We had a bunch of Greco-Roman movies. And that's really lasted all the way through today. Now we're kind of at the tail end of that arc. And Dune is a sort of descendant of that type of movie, even though it has its own lineage. But in terms of filmmaking, we see something akin to Gladiator in Dune, if you can sort of see that by extension. Well, the problem is that when I as a frequent moviegoer, when I watch movies, part of me is watching what's literally shown to me on the screen. Part of me is looking for a kind of figurative depth and symbolism in movies. We all do that. We all look for what the filmmakers are trying to convey. What's the meaning? What's the purpose of this? What does it say about now? What does it say about then? All the different things that we see in films. But there's also something in me that watches movies and looks for things that you can see the producers looking for the next big money grab. They're looking for some sort of big hit where they can have a series of movies afterwards. And I think, in my opinion, Dune and Dune 2 did not do that, because they were, even though David Lynch had already made a Dune film, they were wholly original in terms of their aesthetic. And I could see the filmmaking of Denis Villeneuve leading up to this point where it's kind of like I just covered Arrival, and Arrival seems to be a movie that was made as a testing ground for Denis Villeneuve to do Dune later on, which is not bad. But when that was made, it has a wholly original way of filmmaking, in my opinion. Well, Gladiator 2 is not going to be that. I think it's doing well at the box office, and I think people, I went to a 10:15 a.m. showing, and the theater was full of all sorts of different people. Maybe this is a result of the new political era that we're moving into, or whatever, what have you. Maybe it's just because Denzel movies pull audiences. Maybe because Denzel plays Emperor Clarence Thomas in the film, watching the journalists get torn apart in the year 2050 in the Biodome Coliseum. Which is a great tweet that I saw back in the day. But suffice it to say, Denzel carries the movie, and we don't have a strong cast of supporting characters. I think that's partly because of the writing and partly maybe because of the casting. And that's sort of antithetical to what I've just said the last 3 streams about movies, that movies depend on the ensemble, because when you have a film where you're blasted with A-list actors, like for instance Oppenheimer, there's too much going on, and there are too many egos at stake, and there's too much There's too much happening on the screen for us to care about the characters, and sort of the opposite happens with this one. But they have the same result, which is that it's hard. I think, at least it was me. If I stand for movie-going audiences, if I'm the conduit for that, I didn't really care about the protagonist. I didn't really care about his journey. I didn't really care where he was going, and it's because he doesn't have much of a speaking role. He doesn't have much to say, and a lot of his time on screen is unearned. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Says Chris Cuomo as he's asking himself. Let's get after it. He asks himself questions as he's a professor. I love how Merchant Royce point that out. It's so true. What do I mean by that? Well, here we go. What do I mean by that? Well, that is a word in a sentence, which means that. That's Chris Cuomo. Bad impression, but that's sort of what he does. So let's get after it. So we have we start the film, and we have the opening credits give us the exposition to understand Gladiator. Now, this was pretty clever how they did this, because it would have been cheap if we had just seen clips from the movie like we're watching YouTube to understand what happened in Gladiator. They have to give us some exposition, because and they match this with dialogue in the movie, because one thing in the movie is when they come upon Derek Jacobi, whom I thought is still alive, thankfully. Derek Jacobi plays one of the senators. Remember, he was one of the senators in Gladiator. Derek Jacobi's great. He's one of the great Shakespearean actors. He also, speaking of Henry V, gives the prologue to Henry V. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. So he's in this again, and he even points out this is a generation later. People don't know Maximus. They don't know that. Just like this is a generation after. Can you believe it's been a generation since Gladiator? It really has. Things are so completely different from when Gladiator came out to now, and you couldn't expect, especially younger movie-going audiences, if they go to the movies, to understand what Gladiator is, or to even have heard of it. It just doesn't fit into their zeitgeist at all. For one, younger audiences don't go to movies. They watch TikTok. And I'm not saying this as a cut on younger audiences. This is just what they have. So with the internet, there was so much of a push. Now we can see this in hindsight. There was so much of a push in the late 20th century to move into a fully high-tech 21st century. Everything has to be high-tech. Knowledge is power, all this stuff. Well, what ended up happening is sort of what J.G. Ballard talks about in The Drowned World, where instead of living in a high-tech world where we all have hoverboards, we have hoverboards that still have wheels on them. The future is boring. Now, that's a sort of hyperbolic statement in a way, but we all know that's the case because of the sterility of movies, of art. There's not much being made. There are a number of different factors for this. They had the writer's strike 2 years ago. So my friend Paul told me, I was talking to a friend of mine, Baxter, the other day, and he pointed out that, remember when Paul told us, about during the writer's strike in Hollywood, that we won't see any original content for a couple years. And he was absolutely right. He predicted that. Just like, shouts out to my friend Paul out there, because he also works in LA. In Hollywood, he also pointed out to me, before they'd even made the first live action remake of a Disney movie, that they were going to remake all of the Disney films, animated Disney films, into live action films because of the built-in audience with them. And when he said that to me, it was a long time ago, and I thought, what are you talking about? That doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? And he said that, Hollywood, for the most part, especially moneyed interests, don't have the imagination that you expect them to have. They move more like a finance industry. They crave stability, and they repudiate uncertainty. Well, that all turned out to be true. But we see that with the technological push into the 21st century now, I think as a kind of counter reaction, we're high tech here. We're boomer teching it here, but we're, I think in terms of our daily lives, I think we're going to see much more of a low tech thing, especially as far as education goes. Low tech in terms of going back to the way, for instance, education was for hundreds of years, nay, thousands, back to the Romans and Greeks, and learning to actually read and write before moving into high tech. You have to build the foundation before you can get to the rooftop and exclaim your high techness. Well, that has to work with movies too. It has to be the thing. Movies and books are still written. They have to be written. And that means that the assistance of AI we've already seen just in the brief upsurge in movies where AI plays a part of this, that AI might be great for a lot of things. If you're an accountant and you've got to do spreadsheets and all that stuff, I'm sure that is a wonder for you. I'm sure it really is. But if you are writing literature, if you're writing movies, if you're writing anything that is creative and deals with the human spirit and with what all art is about, right, which is our relationship to God, our relationship to each other, why are we here, what are we supposed to do while we're here, then they have to be written by human beings. And that is only something that is mimicked by AI through a program. It doesn't have the verve, the jouissance that the human writer and that doesn't mean that everything written by a human is great, obviously. Most literature that is written, most movies that are made are not good. They're going to continue to be that way. But the good ones have something that breaks through. They break on through to the other side with us, and they hit on our past, on our experience, on our psyche. The past is prologue. All these different things. So Gladiator had that because Maximus has this odyssey where he goes from being a general and talking about honor, strength and honor, with Marcus Aurelius to he's at odds with the Commodus character. And Commodus, in a way, Commodus sort of represents what I was just talking about. Everything is superficial. It's mimicry. It's synthetic. He wants to be like Marcus Aurelius, but he's not him, and people can see that. So he supplants beauty and creation and construction with death, destruction, and ugliness. And that's not to say that the gladiatorial thing is all ugly. There is something, we get sports from that, and we get the martial spirit, and we get competition. But in terms of the blatant bloodshed, I mean, think about the Christians in the Colosseum being slaughtered by lions. I mean, this is the spirit of Commodus. And so when Maximus goes through his arc, and first he's alone, then he makes a friend of Jamin Hunsu, then he shows that he can fight. He's not just a nobody, but he never says to anybody, I'm a general, and he doesn't go over the top in the first battle that he does when he's first made a gladiator. He rises his way up through teamwork. He has other guys that want to work with him because they see that he has leadership abilities, and they follow what he says. But when he ends up kind of directing them, they listen to him. And that's because he's demonstrated his abilities. And then so finally, by the time we get to him revealing who he is, the big reveal in Gladiator, the crowd sees the dialectic. They see the difference between Commodus. Look at Commodus' statue, wearing the wolf mask with the club in his hand, but he's still an emperor. You can't have the emperor in the arena pretending to be a gladiator, wanting to be a gladiator, and still be the emperor. People aren't, they're going to see through that. They're going to see it's just bloodlust. They're going to see that you're probably more like Caligula with his head lopping machines, right? Throwing apples at people, just lopping heads. Incitatus, I make incitatus. I make my horse a senator, which actually does come up in this film. Versus Maximus, who is all, he's all man, he's all passion, he's fighting for his wife and child that have been slaughtered by the corruptible elites. And he says he'll take part in the coup. It doesn't quite make it, and it turns into a Rocky story because he actually, in Gladiator, remember, he wins, but he loses. So it's a Pyrrhic victory at the end. He is poisoned and is, being stabbed with a poison pen or whatever by Commodus and loses, but he regains his honor and even regains the fame that he had from the people out in the arena. Well, the hero in this one does not do that. So the movie starts off with this montage of the exposition from Gladiator. We watched that happen, and it was pretty clever how they did it in a way. But then we open on some grain, and we see. I saw that this was not going to work. From the minute that I saw the grain in the hand, I knew that they were going to use the motif from the first one, with Maximus continually picking up dirt and chalking his hands like he's connected to the earth. Don't forget that you are not a god. You are a person, and you will go down to dust. Well, that's Maximus, and they were going to use that as a motif in this one that they were going to completely overdo. And I was right; they did that over and over. But we see the hero, and he's on his farm, and he's talking to his wife, and then we hear the call of the wild or whatever, and we know that somebody is coming. Now, look, when you look out over the walls of the city and you see the Roman triremes coming to your town, you're fucked, right? Excuse my language, affiliates, but you are. And actually, this might sound bad, but when I saw the Roman triremes coming across the sea towards Numidia, I thought, I know who's going to win, first of all, and I think I'm for the other guys. I think I'm for the Romans. You want to. We live in a weird time where, the underdog has been subverted to no longer be a true underdog. So now I long for the alpha dog to come in and give civilization to the Numidians. Well, the Numidians are still honorable, because what happens is the main dude and his wife, she's got like the same tat that the ladies had in the latest True Detective season. Remember the Inuits when I covered this with Maddie, Digital Minefield, the Inuits have this customary cultural tattoo right here, but it makes it look kind of like she has a little goatee. And I thought, okay, all right, what's happening? By the way, do I even trust that the people I see on screen are who I think they are in real life in terms of who's playing them? See my last stream. I don't know. So it made me a little uneasy. Just let the Romans come in. Well, then we see the Numidian king, Numa, or it wasn't Numa. Numa was a Roman, but this guy was pretty cool. We know we're in Africa, and we've got this one character. This is kind of a subversion of what we usually see. We have he's the white guy amongst the Africans fighting against the Romans, and that's not something that we see anymore. And he's a kind of son figure to the father figure Numidian king, and that guy was pretty cool. He was kind of like, it reminded me of the original Gladiator when they're fighting in Germania, and we see the guy come out with the big battle axe and throw the head. Like, that dude was cool, right? And then you see Let Slip the Dogs of War, which is a Caesarian reference, right, from Mark Antony giving his prior to his funeral oration in Julius Caesar, cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war. Well, we literally see that in the first battle in Gladiator. In this one, we see the wife put on her armor like the husband does, and it seems that she's the only lady fighting. I didn't see other ladies fighting, and I thought, on the one hand, okay, we're going to have everybody fighting. Like, imagine this for the Vikings, so you have the shield maidens, and everybody's fighting because they're about to be invaded. But I didn't see any others, so that was kind of am I going into weird territory? Is what I thought. But so the Romans invade, and they're led by, I guess, Pedro Pascal. What's up with Pedro Pascal's voice? Have you noticed this? Like, he's like, listen, Romans. He's got a weird trumpet sound to his voice in other words, his voice doesn't match the way that his character looks on screen. He looks pretty cool. He looks like a Roman who's, guiding his units, and they're going to trebuchet the town with Greek fire, and they get attacked. But he's like, I'm giving a speech. And then we see, this is the start of the bad stuff in the movie. We see the main character give this speech, and it is the worst war speech I've ever heard. It is most of his speeches, and he does like 4 of them in the movie. Most of his, I mean, look, Braveheart says, for a chance, just one chance. Right? And while you were lying in your beds many years from now, you'd give it all up for a chance. Just one chance. It gives me goosebumps to think about it. Well, this one is like, we're here, and they're there. And while death is there, we are not. And while we are here, death is not. Okay, you did a little reflexive thing there, but what are you talking about? This was too much of an attempted logical speech to give before a war. There was absolutely no hyping up the dudes. There was no let's go. There was none of that. Now, are they going to be comfortable with their what we do in life echoes in eternity is awesome. That wasn't in this movie at all. And so when the Romans attack, the Numidians get absolutely eviscerated. We see the wife up on the battlements, right? The fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. And we see Mr. Hero look up, and then Pedro Pascal goes, "Get her!" And then they shoot her through the chest with an arrow, and she falls off into the water, right off the battlements into the water. And then he gets chucked off. But this is actually, they actually kind of redeemed themselves in the movie, because I thought, if this is the way the movie's going, it's going to suck. Well, here they did something cool. We see the hero fall into the water, and he's under for a long time, and he ends up in Night World. He's in Hades. He's at the shores of Styx, and there are all these pebbles, and he looks off into the distance. This is really, really cool, actually. He looks off into the distance, and he sees tornadoes on the horizon, and he sees black water, and we see Charon, the boatman, the ferryman, ferrying the boat across, and we see her turn to look at him, and she gets on the boat, and then he says, "Don't go." He says to her, "Don't go," and she goes off into the underworld, and he is still left living, and then he rises up out of the water. This is the start of his new man, his new journey here, and that was really cool. It was really cool visually, and if they had kept that motif through the rest of the movie, then it could have been something really special, but they didn't keep that. By the way, please make sure you smash that like, leave a comment afterwards for me. You can join the chat right here. You can grab a membership. You can also support me on the links provided. Let's keep going. So he comes out of the water. Yes, he's in it for, yes, Jason, he's sort of in the abyss here, but he rises back out of the water, and then he sees his now wife who's passed on, and he takes her body, and he snaps the arrow off of her chest, and then he keeps it for the rest of the movie. Now, what does he do with the arrow for the rest of the movie? Where does he keep it? Like Christopher Walken says in Pulp Fiction, up his ass. He hid this uncomfortable piece of metal up his ass 10 solid years. Right? No, he doesn't do that, but you're wondering, what does he do with the arrow? How do they keep it? And is this going to come back Is this going to come back to him like in Gladiator, where, remember, he has the point of the arrow, and when he first meets Commodus in the arena, and he has it up his sleeve. Well, this is the feathered end of the arrow, but it doesn't really ever come back. So I could see that they sort of lost that idea. It didn't really make sense. And Denzel is not the Numidian king. There's a different guy who's the Numidian king. So Elon, I'll get to Denzel in a second. So he's captured with a bunch of the other guys. And what happened also in the scene was they burn all the dead, and Pedro Pascal, he honors the dead, even though they're the enemy. All the people are wailing for their lost ones, but he still honors them. So this is foreshadowing how he's going to occur. Things are going to recur later with him in the film, and he's going to redeem himself somehow. Well, now they get shipped off, and they're in the bowels of the slave ship, and Hanno talks to the Numidian king who is injured, and the Numidian king has this nasty wound just like Maximus had in the first one, and he sort of attempts to bind it up, and the guy says, look, I've had enough. I can't be the king and then go off and last much longer. They've destroyed our people. And they end up on the shore. They go into the port of Rome, and we see Rome in the distance. And do you remember how cool it was seeing Rome in Gladiator? Because they did this thing where we think of Rome, if you've ever been I've been to Rome twice, and you see the Roman ruins, which is the romantic imagery of Rome, which is seeing glory in ruins, right? So you see what is, and then what it has been left, and that's sort of the wander above the sea of fog aesthetic of romantic poetry in a Romanesque sense. Well, in the film, Rome is all completely put together, and it was a pretty well done CGI in the first one, and it looks dark. It's like it almost looks like a black shining marble. In this one, we don't get it because it's much more in daylight, which is interesting because we just had the journey into the underworld, but now we're going to juxtapose that with daylight going into Rome. But we see that we're entering the empire, and this is not the empire of Marcus Aurelius. This is moving on from Marcus Aurelius down through Commodus, and now we have the Gemini twins ruling Rome. And this is pretty cool how they did this. So we have Geta and Caracalla, who are the twin emperors of Rome, and things have completely fallen apart. Here's the point in the movie where I started to question what this was going to say about our current, our current climate, our current situation in the world under sort of globus, Schwabian control, and whether that's moving or not through the vision of movies. Because if we have the twin emperors, it reminds me of the dual elector that happened in 2020 and all the shenanigans that happened, and now we're moving into something else, still part of the same era, still post Caracalla era. But what was this going to say about the eventual descent into degradation and the complete decadence of the fall of Rome? And was there going to be anything Caligula-like in the film? Well, there was. In fact, what was really interesting about when we see the two emperors is that one of the emperors, Caracalla, is played by the dude who played the metalhead in Stranger Things. Remember the latter seasons of Stranger Things? They introduced the metalhead dude who's like shredding Metallica on top of the Ghost Mansion. That dude is cool, and I like him, and I think that he's going to go places as an actor because, for one, he was pretty unrecognizable in this, and I believed that he was who he was, Caracalla. His twin was played by some other guy who weirdly looked exactly like Caligula and exactly like Joaquin Phoenix at the same time. And I don't know how they did that. I don't know if the real actor looks like that, what they did to his makeup, but for some reason, he was like three different people in one person. He was a kind of homunculoid guy his head was too big, and he was the twin of Caracalla, and he was Joaquin Phoenix. They have the same face, which is really weird. And he also looks exactly like when on like the History Channel, when they say this is what Caligula would have looked like if he were a human, that's what he looks like. And this was really well done because these two guys, as soon as Pedro Pascal does his triumphal return into Rome with his Numidian prisoners, and he goes in and he meets the two emperors, you really got a sense of the dynamics of Rome and the hierarchy in terms of the empire. I thought this was pretty true to life. This was really well done. So what I mean by that is this guy is the hero of Rome. He commands all these legions. He's got 5,000 people under his control right there. He's sort of set off against people like Macro or what's his name? Macro or Agrippa. But he meets these two emperors, and they are completely unpredictable. I thought this was good. They pick up a sword, and Caracalla knights him, kind of mockingly knights him with the Gladiator sword, but he has the sword resting on Pedro Pascal's shoulder, and you can see blood start to trickle out of his neck because the sword is resting against it. And this is the sort of psychotic thing that the totally inbred, crazy globalist emperor people do in the pyramid people, where they are in control of all of these people, but at the same time, they are unpredictable and chaotic, and so you don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to chop this guy's head off? You get the feeling that if they wanted to, they could just chop the general's head off, and that would be the end of it. And in fact, the Caligula emperor, the Geta character, picks up this. I mean, there's a lot of throwing swords in this, which is, once you do something unique in a film like that, if you're holding a sword and you throw it angrily and it clatters on the marble, you can't do it again, right? You have to have an economy of interesting takes in a film where something stands out. Once you do it again, it's kind of like in comedy with the rule of three. You know, if you do something once, it's funny. If you do something twice, it's funny. If you do it the third time again, it's not funny anymore. So you have to do a variation of it. So, yeah, your money is on it sucking. I mean, that's exactly what I was saying, that my money was on the movie being total trash. But there are redeeming elements in this, and I think it's worthy of going to see. I think it's probably a good date movie, and there's certainly plenty to talk about in the film. It's not as well done as it could have been, and it's certainly no comparison to the original Gladiator. But I think it does some interesting things here. And one again is that it shows the hierarchy of people, and that in terms of this kind of weird pyramid that has come to be in terms of the contemporary, where we are now in terms of the globalist command structure, one thing that I think this movie shows is that it inherits a lot of that from Rome, and that it's not necessarily more high IQ. The more high IQ, the more powerful you are. And it's almost like the more unpredictable and chaotic and psychotic you are, the more powerful you are. And that sounds obvious, but these two characters really are kind of like twin pillars of this total psychosis. But then what the movie does is it loses the momentum that it had with that. You could have had something really great in terms of the depravity of these two characters, and it lightened up on that. And not that I want to see that in a movie, but I'm saying if they're going in that direction, then we have to hate the two characters that are going to be counterpoints to the hero. And you actually start to see in the film that Caracalla looks like he's going to be he's a total psychotic, but he might provide some sort of stability for the empire. Whereas Geta, you figure when you're watching it, is a complete lunatic, but will probably take over from Caracalla. Now, that is what happened. That's what happened in real life. That's what happens in the film. But there could have been some other way. I don't know. They made the film. But what they did not really work, because the next scene, we see the hero now fighting a gladiatorial bout where they release the new slaves into this ramshackle arena. And who's there? Emperor Denzel. So Denzel is the character that, not David Hemmings. David Hemmings was in Gladiator. He's the one who goes, Scipio Africanus. That's David Hemmings, right? Guy with the eyebrows. He's the choral announcer at the arena. Oliver Reed. So Oliver Reed's last film was Gladiator. I think he passed away during the making of Gladiator. And he provides a sort of father figure for Maximus. So Denzel is that character in this one, and he owns the Gladiator school. And they release these guys into the arena, and they fight a bunch of baboons. Now, this was not done well. It was done well in terms of the shock value of it, but we're clearly seeing dudes fighting CGI baboons in an arena. And they should be past that in films. They should be past the point of cognitive dissonance when we're watching it. We ought to believe what we're seeing. And the main character at one point, he fights the baboon by getting on the ground and screaming at the baboon like he is also a baboon. So he makes himself into a beast, which doesn't work in terms of the themes of the movie, because if the character is on a redemption arc and he's already been brought as low as he can, which is down to Hades, it doesn't make sense for him to then rise out, be a person, and then make himself into a beast to rise up again. You can't have two lows. You can't go high, low, high, low. It has to be a continuous arc. And that doesn't really work here. It does engender some good feelings amongst the other gladiators, because when he goes into the gladiator school and he's sitting down at a table, they all start kind of screaming like baboons. And that was cool because it reminded me of the Caracalla videos from Australia where they were put into the pods and everybody was shouting like gibbons. Well, that was pretty cool. But it's not enough to make him a hero. So then he does his audition for Denzel. And here's my problem with Denzel in the movie. Shouts out to Chase right there. Was there any points? Yes. Yeah. Chase, this one wasn't just things just happen. It wasn't the same as Napoleon, which was exactly about a year. I think it was exactly a year ago. There was a point to this. But when he does the audition, the Gladiator audition in front of Denzel, what I found with this was, here was the problem with Denzel. So Denzel is playing a complex character in this, and that's good. And he actually goes against type, and I'll get to that later into what happens with his character. But my main problem was that if you're going to play a Roman in a toga, especially in a fancy toga with cheetah prints and gold, and you're blinged out and you've got rings on every finger, you can't be fiddling with everything you're wearing every second, because it looks like you're, like Macbeth says, why do they fit me in borrowed robes? Right? It looks like he doesn't fit the part. Now, in a way, he doesn't fit the part in terms of his character, but yes, OG Gladiator is a classic, but that's by choice. That's not because of him, because they've made him into something that he's not. He wants to transcend his position. But when you're wearing a toga and you're constantly rolling up your sleeves and fixing your sleeves and doing this, it just looks like you have Tourette's. It doesn't look like you fit the position of power that you hold. Now we know he's in a powerful position, because when he auditions the gladiator who fights against the gladiator school maestro and he wins, he gives this speech. This is the bad writing. He gives a speech, a brief monologue to Paul Mescal, or whatever the guy's name is, about how gladiators survive based on a sort of a primal instinct, and his is rage. And what's the film? You got a murderous streak. Oh yeah. So picture the monologue that Bill the Butcher does in Gangs of New York. Oh, you got a murderous streak in you, and I like it. That's life boiling up inside of you. Well, ironically, in that film, that also doesn't fit, because Bill gives the greatest monologue in the history of cinema, right? Fear. The spectacle of fearsome acts. This was a great man, right? That's a great speech. But what Leo is doing in the movie doesn't match that, because he's not full of rage. He just balks back at him. But we have to kind of ignore that while Bill does his speech. This one doesn't have either one of those. We see Denzel talking to the main character and telling him how he's full of rage. Something happened to him that's going to make him, what is your goal with this? And Hanno says to him, I won't rest until I see the general's head on a stick or whatever. So he says, I'll settle for the general's head. And he says, that's quite an ambition. But the fact is that the dude has shown zero rage. Like, you can't say the guy is full of rage, that's life boiling up inside of you, if you're not full of rage and we don't see life. The dude who played the main character has zero modulation the entire movie. He has no character development in terms of his portrayal, in terms of his actions, what we see from his inner core boiling out to the outside. If you're full of rage and you're fighting the head of the Gladiator school, you would be full of rage. You'd be, and it's not the beast thing that he did with the baboons. That wasn't rage. That was just him using a tactic. It would be in his eyes. I think that's probably it. That's probably my problem with him. That as much time as I've spent talking about how the secret to film acting is in the eyes, you have to believe the person in their eyes. This guy demonstrates the exact thing that people should not do in movies, which is when you look at him, he has a glassy-eyed look like he's reading the script. He's reading his sides behind his eyeballs. He's trying to remember his marks. He's trying to remember his lines. I don't think I'm being, I think I'm still being pretty generous with this guy in the film because he was okay, but I just don't get how you could let some of this performance like happen in the movie. Now, nobody likes a naysayer or a black-pilled movie nerd when watching movies, but I think that I'm sort of speaking for all of us when we're watching the film. I think that is the problem with the thing. I think that with the movie, I think that he just doesn't look like he's present in the role. And so the other thing that happens is when Denzel gives him the option of like, what do you want to do with this? How far do you want to go? And he says he wants to see the general's head on a platter. Well, he's actually presented with that later on, but he doesn't take it. Yo, shouts out to Shaw right there, drops $10 super chat. A modern Western stream could be Chad and Base Pillar, Unforgiven, Open Range, 310 to Yuma, The Proposition, Deadwood. I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of them. Keep up the good work. Hey, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Thank you for that super chat. And yes, I think we will be doing one of those in the near future, especially with Unforgiven and 310 to Yuma. I meant to do a stream on 310 to Yuma a while back, but we're doing other stuff. So 310 to Yuma, Tombstone. We'll probably throw Tombstone in there, and Pale Rider. Pale Rider would be a good one. I like Westerns too. I actually, I think Westerns are sort of hit or miss with people. They either love them or really hate them. And I can understand people that hate Westerns. I can, what's the word everybody says now? Empathize, which doesn't really mean anything. I can just understand as a human being why people don't like Westerns. Especially, I think that even a lot of our dude friends probably don't like Westerns, and that I can understand that because the Western, there's only so many places you could go with the story. Once we've seen one, we've seen many of them, and not to mention the fact that the Western is kind of insistent and self-conscious about building an American mythology. However, I am a Western fan. I like Westerns. I've covered the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Yes, says Jason, and I've covered No Country for Old Men, which is a great sort of contemporary Western. But 310 to Yuma and Tombstone, we certainly need to do. So we'll discuss those. Thank you for that super chat. This one, okay. So here's the next scene. So then Denzel takes the Gladiator and he takes him to Candyland. And this is where, instead of Calvin Candy and the scene inside Candyland, Mississippi. The only thing I like about Django Unchained is when they go to Mississippi and the title is scrolled across the screen in gigantic letters because half of my family is from Mississippi. So I appreciate that. But he takes him to Candyland, and this is inside of a Roman villa where we are met with how the movie is going to present us with the people we should hate in the movie. And these are the decadent imperial elites. And there's some of this that's done really well. So the first person Denzel meets when he walks in is this senator. This is a guy. This is an English actor. He's a great actor. I can't remember his name. He's good for an ensemble. He's a character actor, and he is clearly Skittles as hell. And he's very welcome, Denzel, to our abode. Oh, he's doing all that shit. Well, that's probably pretty true to life. And we can see at this point in the movie that somehow Denzel is going to use this guy to forward his own ambitions because the guy is morally weak and Denzel is going to feed on that. So he presents to Denzel, I've heard that you want to be a senator. And he says, no, I have no political ambitions. Well, that's true and not true. But we also learned that the guy has something that's going to compromise him, and that is his gambling. And so Denzel is going to use his gambling in conjunction with his own gladiatorial school to find a way in to compromise the senator and to forward his own ambitions. So we see the sort of revelatory aspects of how the movie correlates to contemporary times or to any elite power structure throughout time since the Romans. But it shows you how the past is prologue with the Romans into today. I thought that was interesting. So we are presented then with a room where the Gemini twins are lounging about with all of their minnows. If you've ever seen the movie Caligula, you'll remember that Peter O'Toole played Tiberius, and Tiberius, and this is true, this comes from Gibbon. It's also in, I think it's in Tacitus. Tiberius had this thing where he would go to Capri. I think Capri was his holiday home. That's where he set up his empire. He didn't like to be in Rome, so he went to Capri, and he had the grotto. And if you've ever been to the Blue Grotto is, it's one of the big tourist things in Capri, but it's beautiful. But he had a grotto, and he would have what he called his minnows fishing, like swimming around in the thing, and he would swim, and they would nibble. They would creeper style nibble at his body because the guy was a total pervert. Well, we have these minnows or whatever in this Candyland here, and we have the two Gemini twins, and they say, a fight to the death. Let's have it. We're having a good party here. We're Roman elite scumbags. Let's have a fight to the death. So they bring in, Gigantor or whatever, and he fights Hanno, the protagonist that we've been following all along. Of course, protagonist wins. There's bloodshed, and they just go giddy. They just love it. They love this. So now our protagonist has been promoted to the big show. So he's going to fight total WWE style in the main event. And he goes back to the gladiator school, and now he's in charge. But the thing that did not work in this movie was that Maximus has a quiet strength. He's got a spirit of humility. He's obviously charismatic, but he reserves it. He's great on the battlefield. He's great in the gladiator bouts. He's lethal as fuck. He's a cool dude to watch. This guy doesn't have any of those things. He just kind of assumes power. And when they go into their first match in the Coliseum, they're met with this dude on a rhino. And this also was, the first movie had the tigers and stuff that were cool. The tigers come out and they're rawr at the people or whatever. This one had a dude riding a rhino, and you just thought, practically speaking, like how is this going to work? Because it's like he's kind of slow and moving around, and it doesn't matter how many weapons he has. If he's fighting against like 7 of these gladiators, like dude's going to lose. It was also weird how the other gladiators did not help. Like there was never, in the first movie, there were buku scenes of Maximus fighting somebody and the other dudes would help, or he would help them. Right? Tomatus of Gaul, right? Remember all that? This dude with the mask on, and it was the Gaul. We didn't have that in this. They were in first. Oh, also, instead of David Hemmings, we got Matt Lucas, Bo Selecta. Matt Lucas comes out, and he's the announcer, and he didn't have the announcer's voice. He didn't have the charisma. He's holding a cup of wine, which he splashes on somebody else, which was supposed to be like the little decadent touch. But looking at him, he looked like, when I watched this movie and I saw some of these elites, I thought, this is exactly the way things are now. Imagine being some Montauk victim, and you go into a room, and this Matt Lucas character is there. It's over. That's like a Franklin scandal. That's what that is. That's the guy that you're going to see in there. This bald, what do they call the dudes who sing soprano? A eunuch. He's a bald eunuch, depraved beast character with blue eyeshadow on, and just a sick looking ghoul. These people are chicken neck ninnies and pot-bellied goblins, right? Just goblin slop and vomit all over them. Just a total ghoul. So he looked the part, but he wasn't given the script for the part, and they didn't make him act. There's very little acting, which I found very weird. I'm sorry, Jason. Sounds terrible so far. Yeah, well, these are the terrible parts. Listen, I'm trying to be generous and look for some good stuff here. Yes, no, it is sort of that. Oh, the other thing is, while you're watching the movie, you can clearly see that they scripted Denzel's character to also be Skittles, but you can't tell if they scripted it that way and then left it out or cut scenes because he was like, I ain't doing this shit, or if he's just sort of playing that way to familiarize himself with the elite people that he's later going to blackmail. So is he just acting the part here? The fact that that's not clear in the movie is not a strength. It's not that there's ambivalence or ambiguity rather. It's just that it wasn't solid matching with other points in the film. So, Bo Selecta. You guys remember Bo? Anybody remember that? Was anybody alive in the UK in like 24 years ago? Bo Selecta. That's Matt Lucas. For the old heads, I guess, out there. So he fights against the dude on the rhino and he wins. And now what we learn as we go forward is that Connie Nielsen, who was... And here's a big thing they left out in this movie that they just ignored. Connie Nielsen in the first one plays the good-looking woman who has a kind of chemistry with Maximus, and she offers to save Maximus, but she's also the crept-on sister of Commodus. So her dad is Marcus Aurelius, and she has the son. And remember, the son was met by Maximus right before one of the matches, and the guy in this, the hero, is playing the son in that one, Lucius, who's now grown up and come back. Okay, so we get that in this. That's what I thought the movie was going to be, and that's what it ends up being. And he mentions Maximus, and he says, he was a kind man. He was a kind man. He was a kind man. Why don't you get a job, Al? What movie is that from? There's your trivia for tonight. What movie is that line from? Feed me a stray cat. Oh, also, the coolest character of this film was the, sort of dude from the East who was the medicine man, because he's got the kind of tats on him, and he reminded me of the Swami or whatever. And there you go, Jason got it. Jason, of course, got it. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate you, buddy. You got it. American Psycho. So the dude who plays the Swami in The Mummy I like that dude because he went to my drama school, and he had the kind of tattoos right here. This guy in this film is like that, and he offers the dude he offers the hero devil. He says devil's breath. And it is opium for his wounds. And it's weird because he takes a hit of the glass bottle. The guy carries glass bottles on him like he's a Native American medicine man. Takes a hit of this bottle, and it's like he's vaping. He's opium vaping. And he gets all faded. He's starting to nod out. And then Denzel comes around the corner. Is that opium breath I smell? Which was pretty cool. But the medicine man turns out to be the kind of hero that scarred man on the face was as the servant to Maximus in Gladiator. And by the way, that dude was also in Braveheart. You see the kind of lineage we have in films? I like that dude. That guy with the scar, what's his name? He was in Sons of Anarchy or something. I like that dude a lot. He was in The Saint. Saint's a great movie. I know, I'm getting kind of off track here. But, yes, it is. We have a little dog, a little chow. No, I don't. Okay. So anyway, main dude heals or whatever. And now we learn that Connie Nielsen comes to visit him, and let's try and tighten this up a little bit. Connie Nielsen gets a visit from Denzel. Denzel goes to her villa, and he's talking to her and whatever. Tommy Flanagan, thank you. That's Jethro. Thank you, Jethro. Yeah, Tommy Flanagan. And thank you for the super chats. I will get to those towards the end if you want a super chat. If you want to donate on any of the links that my homeboys are providing right there, I would really appreciate it. I'll get to those as we keep going. So he goes to visit Connie Nielsen, who is living as a kind of dowager. And while this was actually cool. See, while he's walking out, he sees a bust, and he says, "Who this be?" And she says, "Oh, that's young Marcus Aurelius." And he's like, yeah, sure enough, bitch. Nope. We can clearly see that that's Paul Mescal right there in the bust, and that he is the son of Connie Nielsen. Well, that means that the gladiator dude they've got is the actual, real, legitimate emperor, because he is the Prince of Rome, right? But he is hiding in plain sight, and he knows this. Now, how do we get to this place? Okay, well, she goes and visits her son, and this is what I didn't like. There's another thing I didn't like about the movie. She goes and visits her son, and she walks in, and he won't look at her. Now, look, man, I don't care how old you are and how long you've been away from your parents. If you see them, you recognize them. You can recognize them without even looking at them. You would know your kids, and you would know your parents. There they are. They're in the same cell together. There's her son. He doesn't look at her, and she says, Are you my son? Lady, it's been 20 years, but your son was 12 when you sent him away. You would recognize him. It's not like he was a baby. Your son was 12. You'd recognize him even if he were. But he was 12 years old when you sent him away, and his name was Cicero. Yeah, and by the way, Cicero, that I just talked about on, I think, the last stream, Cicero, because I talked about his the biography of Cicero. Cicero is mentioned in this because the main character quotes Virgil when he goes to meet the two emperors, and the emperors, again, this is a sign that it's not just high IQ that makes you raises you through the ranks. It's also total psychopathy and degeneracy. And these two guys don't even know how to read or write. They never heard of Virgil. And they're like, what is that poem? What was that he said? But he gives them a kind of programming code, letting them know that he's been to Hades and that he's going to come back. And he's going to have his vengeance. But when he says it, he's dead-eyed. Again, he's dead-eyed when he says it. I've abandoned my soy! I've abandoned my soy! So he says to her, get out! And he yells at her. Okay, dude, again, so two of the things that I'm seeing in movies now are all the time. This is in every movie now. One is this line that they have in the film when they say, the gods are with you, and if they are not, then they are no gods. Okay, so all the people hoop and holler, and all the loyal Romans are they're just gonna take that. There's not a single pious person that's gonna repudiate that. And pious to their paganism, I get it, but that's the one thing. They take a postmodern angle on a classical scene that is anachronistic. The other is when the hero throws out their loved one and tells them to get away because they're mad because they did something to them 20 years ago. Well, guess what? The thing that she did to him was she sent him away because he was going to be massacred, because in the aftermath of Commodus, they were going to come for her son. So she sent him away to Numidia to live with the natives. So then he comes back. But when he comes back, he's not happy to be reuniting with his mother. who saved his life by doing that. Instead, he's an angsty like Gen X Zoomer or something. So anyway, all right, so let's skip forward. What happens is basically that Denzel calls in his debts with the creeper senator and says, "You lost this bet. Now I own your house. So instead of giving me your house, you're going to support me in the coup." Then there's another side coup that occurs because Pedro Pascal, who's the husband of Connie Nielsen, the general's the husband of Connie Nielsen, he's going to get with the Senate and they're going to overthrow Caracalla and Geta, the two Gemini twin emperors. Well, of course, that's not going to work out. It didn't work out in the first movie, and it's not going to work out in real life. It barely works out. They have that with Caesar, and it's not going to work again because we went through the year of the three emperors. After, what was that? It was after Nero, I think, when we had Galba, and then we had the three emperors. Then we had the year of like 100 emperors, and this is only like 100 years afterwards, but it's just not going to work. Remember that Nero was killed by Macro, his, I think it was Macro. He was killed by Macro, one of his Praetorian Guard. Nero's dying words were, "The world loses such an artist." Nero's foot, by the way, is in the film. We see the kind of Ozymandias, Percy Shelley Ozymandias statue, what's left over from the Domus Aurea. If you've ever been to Rome, one of the coolest places to go, which is not a place many people go, I think, a lot of people go to the Colosseum, but they don't go to the Crypta Portico. The Crypta Portico and the remains of the ruins of the Domus Aurea, which is featured in my book, if I can ever get it published. Hey, if you're a publisher, reach out to me so I can publish my book. But anyway, so the Domus Aurea was the golden house of Nero, and it was an extravagant house overlooking the Colosseum that was built with the funds of Rome, which is partly why when Rome set fire to clear real estate for speculation and for the buildup of new real estate, and to get rid of some of to depop, Nero fiddled while Rome burned, which means that he was playing the lyre and he forced everyone. What Tacitus and Suetonius say about this is that Nero forced everyone into the Colosseum, and while he did this, he would not let anybody out while he recited Homeric odes and played the lyre. So that's him fiddling while Rome burned. He wasn't like playing a violin. But anyway, we learned that Denzel has machinations to also take out the two emperors. And first, he seizes upon Pedro Pascal doing the coup and then places him in the gladiator arena against the protagonist. Well, this was his main object throughout the whole film. He wanted to be face-to-face with the general, and he wanted his head. Well, now he's given the opportunity for his head, but he doesn't take it. Also, they do a lot of this in the film, and what I've always liked is that I think that the thumbs up and thumbs down were kind of the Michael Scott version of the thumbs up and thumbs down, which is the green light means go ahead and execute, right? The red light means stop, don't execute, not kill the guy. I think it was the opposite. Regardless, it's sort of moot at this point. But he doesn't kill the guy. He doesn't get his revenge here because he has learned in the meantime, of course, that the general had honor. He fought an honorable battle against the Numidians. He had honor in his victory, and he ends up getting St. Stephened by the Praetorian Guard right in front of the whole crowd. And then Denzel says to the emperors, I think it's a good time if we get out of here now, because it looks like there's going to be some severe J6 action happening here if we don't, or whatever. You get the point. So the elites, who have been total scumbags, are about to be overrun by the people, and And now he starts to advise the two emperors and play them off one against the other. So then we see Geta, David Geta shouts out to his family. We see David Geta confronting his brother, saying, "Why do you get everything? You have everything and I have nothing." And Caracalla holds out his arm and he quickly, cuts off his hand. And then he puts this blade up to his neck, and Denzel comes along and, "Let me guide thy hand." And he fergaliciously saws the dude's neck in half. And now we have the emperor who is Geta, who is the Caligula emperor. So the Caligula emperor now approaches the Senate, and we have him making these proclamations, and the Senate says yes, and they clap in their very Skittles style. And one of the first things that he does is he appoints his pet monkey as a senator, which is obviously a throwback to Caligula, who appointed his horse a senator. So he even looks like Caligula here. So we're now in the time of total decadence. But what is not done well in the movie is that, yes, we had the battle royale. Yes, we had the fight to the death. We had Candyland. We had the Skittle stuff. We had the minnows. But it's still very tame when they're showing it, and we don't see enough of the exterior people going through hardship. Because even for all of the psychopathy of the elites, we don't see how this is affecting everyone on the outside of the Colosseum. We don't see how it's affecting the common people. We sort of hear drips and drabs of it, but we need to see characterization where other people are suffering. And I don't want to see that in the film, but I'm saying there's no allusion to that in the film, because that would give context for why everything is imploding. Now, we don't, in a way, need to see that, because this is just like now with Rome imploding from the inside. Now, meaning in the over the past 20 years, especially imploding from the inside. It's not just the exterior events impinging upon the wholeness of the new Rome. It's the decadence and depravity imploding our new Rome from the inside, with a lack of religion, lack of values, total disregard for life, all those things. But we don't really see that in the film. And they should have had more of that for a 2.5 hour long film to do that. Well, then we see the final gladiator bout, and we see we see that Denzel comes out, and he now arrow stabs David Geta in the ear, and now he is the new warlord of Rome. But before anything can happen, because he has his legions, Praetorian Guard on the inside versus the legions on the outside, which were loyal to Pedro Pascal and are now loyal to the Prince of Rome because he sent him the ring, we see them about to clash outside. Denzel gets on his horse and rides away to meet the oncoming forces. The main character rides out chasing him Western style, and then the two of them fight as proxy for the war. And they end up fighting. They fall in. As soon as they fell into the river to fight, I knew it was over for the Denzel character, because for one, he's got all these robes on. I mean, his toga is going to choke him in the river. So why chase the guy into the river to fight? And then we see the main character pick up a rock and cane the other guy right in the head, cane Denzel, and now he wins. And then he gives the worst speech of all time again. Right? He says, I am a guy, and you, no, hold on, he's bobbing his head the whole time. I am a guy, and you are soldiers. And now let us have peace. And they go, yeah. And then that's the movie. That's the end. So that's the end of that is the end of that film. Now let's hear what Gibbon has to say about this. Okay, this is the classic Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. This is chapter 6 of the book. I've covered this before, but let's see what he says about this. He says, like most of the Africans, Cerberus was passionately addicted to the vain studies of magic and divination, deeply versed in the interpretation of dreams and omens, and perfectly acquainted with the science of judicial astrology, which in almost every age except the present has maintained its dominion over the mind of man. He had lost his first wife whilst he was governor of the lioness Gaul. In the choice of the second, he sought not only to connect himself with some favorite of fortune, and as soon as he had discovered that a young lady of Arnessa in Syria had a royal nativity, he selected and obtained her hand. We go on because this gives us Caracalla. This says on page 38, 2 sons, Caracalla and Geta, were the fruit of this marriage and the destined heirs of the empire. These are the 2 Gemini twins in the movie. The fond hopes of the father and of the Roman world were soon disappointed by these vain youths who displayed the indolent security of hereditary princes and a presumption that fortune would supply the place of merit and application. Without any emulation of virtue or talents, they discovered almost from their infancy a fixed and implacable antipathy for each other. Their aversion, confirmed by years and fomented by the arts of their interested favorites, broke out in childish and gradually in more serious competitions, and at length divided the theater, the circus, and the court into 2 factions, actuated by the hopes and fears of their respective leaders. The prudent emperor endeavored by every expedient of advice and authority to allay this growing animosity. The unhappy discord by his sons clouded all his prospects and threatened to overturn a throne raised with so much labor, cemented with so much blood, and guarded with every defense of arms and treasure. Upon intelligence of war in Britain and an invasion, AD 208, of the province of the barbarians of the north, Severus, despite his advanced years, accompanied his rival sons upon a successful expedition of that island. The declining health and last illness of Severus inflamed the wild ambition and black passions of Caracalla's soul. Impatient of any delay or division of empire, he attempted more than once to shorten the small remainder of his father's days and endeavored, but without success, to excite a mutiny among the troops. The old emperor had often censured the misguided lenity of Marcus, who by a single act of justice might have saved the Romans from the tyranny of his worthless son. Placed in the same situation, he experienced how easily the rigor of a judge dissolves away in the tenderness of a parent. He deliberated, he threatened, but he could not punish, and this last and only instance of mercy was more fatal to the empire than a long series of cruelty. The disorder of his mind irritated the pains of his body. He wished impatiently for death and hastened the instant of it by his impatience. He expired AD 211, February 4th, at York in the 65th year of his life. Julia attempted to prevent the latest civil war by dividing the sovereignty of the empire between her sons. Caracalla to retain Europe and Geta to rule Asia and Egypt. Caracalla artfully listened to his mother's entreaties and consented to meet his brother in her apartment on the terms of peace and reconciliation. In the midst of their conversation, some centurions who had contrived to conceal themselves rushed with drawn swords upon the unfortunate Geta. His distracted mother strove to protect him in her arms, but in the unavailing struggle she was wounded in her hand and covered with the blood of her younger son, while she saw the elder animating and assisting the fury of the assassins. As soon as the deed was perpetrated, Caracalla, with hasty steps and horror in his countenance, ran towards the Praetorian camp as his only refuge and threw himself on the ground before the statues of the tutelar deities. The soldiers attempted to raise and comfort him. In broken and disordered words, he informed them of his imminent danger and unfortunate escape, insinuating that he had prevented the designs of his enemy, and declared his resolution to live and die with his faithful troops. Geta had been the favorite of the soldiers, but complaint was useless, revenge was dangerous, and they still reverenced the son of Severus. Their discontent died away in idle murmurs, and Caracalla soon convinced them of the justice of his cause by distributing in one lavish donation the accumulated treasures of his father's reign. Caracalla's only reign was marked by capricious and monstrous cruelties, and he was assassinated near Edessa, March 8th, 2017. So it's totally different from the movie. The movie has a historical fiction with it, but that's okay. The Virgil, let's see. The Virgil passage in Gladiator 2 is, "The gates of hell are open night and day. Smooth the descent and easy is the way. But to return and view the cheerful skies, in this the task and mighty labor lies." This is the Sibyl from Virgil in his descent to the underworld, which is what happens in the film. Now, this is one of the positive things about the film. The film has a dark counterpoint to Maximus seeing Elysium in the first film. Remember, his visions of the afterlife are centered on his wife and child. And the thing that did not make sense in this movie is that all of a sudden, by implication, because of the implication, by implication, we have that Maximus cheated on his wife, loved Connie Nielsen, and had this love child who ends up being the bastard son / Prince of Rome, who is the hero in Gladiator 2. That was sort of implied in the first one. Yeah, that was the John Dryden translation. Dryden writes in couplets for his translation of Virgil, but we didn't. That was the implication in the first one, but it's not something that was explicit in the first one, at least as far as I remember, because that's a character fault, and we don't get that with Maximus. Now, that's not to say that he is he's supposed to be a hero in the Christian tradition. I mean, this is Marcus Aurelius' reign. This is 200 years into the new millennium, into Anno Domini. This is, early Christianity is happening, and we still have the Roman Empire is still going strong, but it takes away from everything that we got from Maximus, and I think that that's a fault in the movie because it just makes us accept at face value that's how this kid came to be. And that's not something that was in the original. That's one of the reasons that we like Maximus. He's presented with the same choice that William Wallace is presented with in Braveheart. Remember in Braveheart, he's fighting to avenge his lost love, which is Catherine. What's her name? Catherine McCormick. She went to Oxford School of Drama. He eventually, like Sophie Marceau, is so disgusted by Edward II and his Skittles actions that she wants to save him. She even wants to give him like the opium at the end of the movie so that he won't feel the pain. But instead, he says, he wants to feel every second of it and freedom, right? So that Longshanks will hear it also on his deathbed. But yes, Chase. Notice how I try to say good things about the film and then instantly go back to saying why the film sucks. I'm not trying to give a compliment sandwich here for the film, but I think that there are things that are important for the film in the good things that we can get from it. However, the bad things are by implication, and that shows how far we've come in movies. It's like we have a combination of total depravity and immorality combined with a subtle form of positive morality, which is actually based on shaky ground in the movie. Now, we shouldn't be getting our morals from movies, obviously. That I've said over and over again, that's not where we're getting them. And these were people, and they were complex. But why take away the good thing from the first movie to give us the second movie? It doesn't make sense why they would do that. Why make him Maximus his son? I didn't understand that. Is it just cheap writing or what is it? Let's look at the actual passage in the Aeneid, because this is cool, because this is from book 6 of this is a literary channel. So we've covered the Aeneid, we've covered book 6 in the Calabasas stream, and we've also talked about how much Virgil took from or how much Dante took from Virgil in terms of the Inferno. But it's interesting just to go back to look at it and to look at Virgil's version of Hades. So what he says is here, he says, this is Virgil going down into Hades, and he's going to try and find Anchises, who is his son. The father of the parents of Virgil are Anchises and Venus. And Virgil is a Trojan who leaves at the end of the Trojan War. At the end of the Trojan War, when Troy is falling, he rescues Anchises, takes him out. They eventually make their way on their own odyssey to not to Crete, but to like Corfu or something, where they think that they are supposed to be destined to found a new civilization. It ends up being the wrong place. They make their way through Carthage. They make their way. Then finally he makes his way into the underworld because he has to go, because Anchises, before he dies, says that you have to go visit him in the underworld. While he's there, he goes to meet the Sibyl. The Sibyl is the seer. She's the oracle, and she's going to, number one, provide Virgil with a way to enter hell, but also to talk to Anchises. And while he's there, he meets up with Dido. Dido of Carthage was in love with Aeneas and eventually unalives herself. And then when, in Virgil's version, when he's down in the underworld, he sees Dido, who turns her back to him in her grief. She's in the second, Dante puts her in the second circle of hell. And eventually Aeneas has to make his way to Italy, because when he gets to Italy, his grandsons will be Romulus and Remus, who will be suckled by the she-wolf, and Romulus will kill Remus, and eventually that will be the Roman people. So the Roman people have their provenance in Troy. So Virgil, writing for Augustus, the Emperor Augustus, or Octavian, gives an epic poem in the tradition of Homer to justify the existence and the fortunes of Rome, just like every modern nation has. El Cid is for Spain. The Song of Roland is France. We have Beowulf for England, etc. So here we go. Gods who rule the ghosts, all silent shades and chaos and infernal fiery stream in regions of wide night without a sound, may it be right to tell what I've heard. May it be right and fitting by your will that I describe the deep world sunk in darkness under the earth. Now dim to one another in desolate night, they walked on through the gloom, through Dis's homes all void. Dis is the city of Dis, the city of the city of not, right? Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And empty realms, as one who goes through a wood by a faint moon's treacherous light, when Jupiter veils the sky and black night blots the colors of the world. Milton also uses this as part of his descriptions of hell in Paradise Lost, which I recently just recovered. Before the entrance in the jaws of Orcus, grief and avenging Caries have made their beds, and pale diseases and sad age are there, and dread and hunger that sways men to crime, and sordid want in shapes to affright the eyes, and death and toil and death's own brother sleep, and the mind's evil joys on the door sill, death-bringing war and iron cubicles of the Eumenides, and raving discord, viperish hair bound up in gory bands. In the courtyard a shadowy giant elm spreads ancient boughs, her ancient arms wear dreams, false dreams, the old tale goes, beneath each leaf cling and are numberless. There too about the doorway forms of monstrous crowd, centaurs, twi-formed Scyllas, hundred-armed Briareus, and the Hydra hissing horribly, and the Chimera breathing dangerous flames, and Gorgons, Harpies, huge Geryon, triple-bodied ghost. Here, swept by sudden fear, drawing his sword, Aeneas stood on guard with naked edge against them as they came. If his companion, knowing the truth, had not admonished him, how faint these lives were, empty images hovering bodiless, he had attacked and cut his way through phantoms, empty air. So this is Virgil going into the underworld with the Sibyl, just like Dante goes into the underworld with Virgil as his guide. The path goes on from that place to the waves of Tartarus's Acheron, thick with mud, a whirlpool out of a vast abyss. Bulls up and belches all the silt it carries into Cocytus. Here the ferryman, a figure of fright, keeper of waters and streams, is Charon, foul and terrible, his beard grown wild in hoar. Hoar, H-O-A-R, means like white. His staring eyes all flame. The flaming eyes is borrowed by Dante when he talks about Satan in the ninth circle of hell in ice. And the ninth circle of hell, again, if you haven't been here, the ninth circle of hell is an ice world where Satan is upside down. He's upside down just like the Titans in this. He's upside down because when he is hurled headlong into the earth, as Christopher Marlowe says in Dr. Faustus, he falls to the bottom of the world, and it's a world of ice because it's so hot that it's cold, and he is frozen in time, in space, and in terms of his will and his intent. So instead of flames, which and the darkness, so it's so dark the darkness is visible, where these spirits and fallen angels are by choice out of the light of God, right? And they are burned. They're burned and singed because their sin is supposed to be singed away. They're tempered by the majesty of God. Here they are at the farthest end, thrice to the utmost pole, as far away by choice as they can possibly be. Frozen in time. His sordid cloak hung from a shoulder knot. Alone he pulls his craft and trims the sails, and in his rusty hull ferries the dead. Old now, but old age in the gods is green. That was good because they actually had a pretty good depiction of the ferryman in Gladiator 2, I thought. Here a whole crowd came steaming to the banks, mothers and men, the forms with all life spent of heroes great in valor, boys and girls unmarried, and young sons laid on the pyre before their parents' eyes, as many souls as leaves that yield their hold on boughs and fall through forests in the early frost of autumn, or as migrating birds from the open sea that darken heaven when the cold season comes and drives them overseas to sunlit lands. There all stood begging to be first across and reached out longing hands to the far shore. But the grim boatmen now took those aboard, now those, waving the rest back from the stand. In wonder at this and touched by the commotion, Aeneas said, "Tell me, sister, what this means, the crowd at the stream. Where are the souls bound? How are they tested, so that these turn back while those take oars to cross the dead black water?" Briefly, the ancient priestess, the Sibyl, answered him, "Cocytus is the deep pool that you see, the swamp of Styx beyond, infernal power, and by which the gods take oath and fear to break it. All of the nearby crowd you notice here are pauper souls, the souls of the unburied. Charon's the boatman. Those, the water bears, are souls of buried men. He may not take them shore to dread shore on the hoarse currents there, until their bones rest in the grave, or till they flutter and roam this side 100 years. They may have passage then, and may return to cross the deeps they longed for." Anchises' son had halted, pondering on so much, and stood in pity for the soul's hard lot. Among them he saw two sad ones of unhonored death, who had sailed the windy sea from Troy together till the southern gale had swamped and whirled them down, both ship and men. See, moving on, he says, "By heaven's happy light and the sweet air, I beg you, by your father and by your hopes of Iulus's rising star, deliver me from this captivity, unconquered friend. Throw earth on me. You can. Put into Velia port, or if there be some way to do it, if your goddess mother shows a way, and I feel sure you pass these streams in Stygian marsh, by heaven's will, Stygian, the Stygian black. It's as black as Styx. Give this poor soul your hand, take me across, let me at least in death find quiet haven." When he had made his plea, the Sibyl said, "From what source comes this craving, Palinurus? Would you, though still unburied, see the Styx in the grim river of the Eumenides, or even the river bank, without a summons? Abandon hope by prayer to make the gods change their decrees. Hold fast to what I say to comfort your hard lot. Neighboring folk and cities up and down the coast will be induced to portents to appease your bones, building a tomb and making offerings there on a cape forever named Palinurus." And then he meets Dido's ghost, and then eventually he sees the future of Rome with the two Scipio Africanus, Scipio the Younger, beating Hannibal at Zama in 202, the destroyer of Carthage, where they razed Carthage to the ground, salted the earth. And let's see, and eventually they see the Caesarian line, because the Caesars claimed ancestry from, or lineage from Aeneas. Let's see. He says, let me get to this one part. Yeah, and then we go into book 7. Okay, let me read you what he says in the Aeneid here. So this is a different translation of what he said. How he quotes the Dryden translation of Virgil. This is again in book 6. He says, see it. And so Aeneas prayed, clasping the altar. The prophetess began. This is the symbol. Born of the blood of gods and son of Troy's Anchises, easy the way that leads into Avernus. Day and night the door of darkest Dis is open. But to recall your steps, to rise again into the upper air, that is the labor, that is the task. Right? Smooth the gates of hell are open night and day. Smooth the descent and easy is the way. But to return and view the cheerful skies, in this the task and mighty labor lies. Which is makes sense even in terms of Christ's teaching and Christian theology. Think about how easy it is to slip into sin or temptation or falling wholesale into the passions, right? The way to heaven, right, is the gate is narrow. It's a very small opening to get to salvation, strict, but the way to hell is wide. Like everyone wants to go there. Everyone who gets there wants to go because they want to live with impunity, right? A few whom Jupiter has loved in kindness, or whom blazing worth has raised to heavens as God's sons returned. Through all the central region runs a forest encircled by the black curves of Cocytus. But if your mind is moved by such a love, so great a longing, twice to swim the lake of Styx and twice to see black Tartarus, and you are pleased to try this mad attempt, then, Trojan, hear what you must first accomplish. A bough is hidden in a shady tree. Its leaves and plants stems are golden, set aside as sacred to Proserpina. This is the golden bough. The grove serves as its screen, and shades enclose the bough in darkened valleys. Only he may pass beneath the earth's secret spaces who first plucks the golden leaf fruit of that tree. Lovely Proserpina ordained that this be offered to her as gift, and when the first bough is torn off, a second grows again, with leaves of gold, again of that same metal. So let your eyes search overhead, and when the bough is found, then pluck it down by hand as due. For if the fates have summoned you, the bough will break off freely, easily, but otherwise no power can overcome it. Hard frond cannot help to tear it off, and more, the lifeless body of your friend now lies, but you have still to learn of this. Defiling all your fleet with death, while you still ask your destiny and linger at its own threshold. First, you are to carry him to his own place of rest and burial and bring black cattle as peace offering. And so, at last, your eyes shall see the groves of Styx, the lands of the living never pass. So spoke, and then was silent, her lips unclosed. That's the end of the oracle. Last thing I wanted to go over was Caracalla. This is from a book that I have from the 1960s. And this is a really nice edition. It's just a book on ancient Rome with Senatus Populusque Romanus on the front. Look at this nice book. This is the way they made books in the 60s. Look at this. And it opens up with an introduction to Rome here in small print, and then we have the maps of Rome. But there's a section here on, this is like every aspect of Rome. This and Edith Hamilton's Mythology and The Roman Way and The Greek Way are great books on Rome. This is a section on Geta and Caracalla. Here you see this fresco right here. And in the fresco, you see that the face of Geta has been rubbed out. And there's actually a lot on Caracalla here. It says, this is chapter 10, an era of excess. And this is particularly relevant for now, right? Of course, this is relevant for now. To me, this is like where we are or where we're leading into in terms of the arc of at least the United States and global hegemony into the globalist world and the destruction of the civilization. It says, seldom in history has so speedy and tragic a reversal taken place as that which followed the era of the good emperors of 2nd century AD Rome. Despite tensions and wars along its frontiers, the empire of Marcus Aurelius stood at the zenith of stability and liberal order when his death in AD 180 left it in the hands of the gross and dull-witted Commodus. In the next generations, it was to decline into a condition approaching disruption. Military adventurers and usurpers followed each other to the throne. Civil wars broke out. A police state was established, and political agents and soldiery swarmed like locusts over the land, while footloose robber bands scoured the countryside. Sounds like now, doesn't it? The treasury was looted periodically. Trade stagnated, and Goths, Franks, and Persians overran the uncertain frontiers. This is now. After the sun of Rome's late summer, storms arose on every side. The signs of decay, corruption, barbarity, and fear lay across the entire Roman world. At rare intervals, an emperor with sufficient strength and intelligence would arise to halt the steady corrosion for a few months or years. New ideas would be brought forth to reconstitute the weakened state. But the process of decomposition was never wholly arrested. At the center of its causes lay the very nature of absolute monarchy, with no remaining civil body able effectively to restrain it. All could be well under a strong and magnanimous emperor. All could go wrong under a venal and predatory one who had been hoisted into power by his soldiery. This was the era that saw a vast increase in the power of the military as a whole, over and beyond that of the emperor's Praetorian Guard. Increasingly, massive provincial armies had come into being, permanently stationed in far parts of the empire and composed more and more of non-Roman levies. Each of these armies, the greatest being those in Britain, in the Danube, Balkan area, and in Syria, saw in its successful leader a potential emperor, and on occasion rival armies would proclaim rival emperors. The result was to be the first steps toward division of the empire on one hand and total militarization on the other. Commodus, last member of the dynasty founded by Antonius Pius, made way for this military era by instituting his own regime of terror, one so unconscionable and savage that many leading citizens looked to the armies for relief. Not since Nero had so odious and degenerate a person appeared at the top. Priding himself on his physical prowess, yet without a shred of courage, Commodus found his best friends among gladiators. It amused him to appear in the arena in gladiatorial costume and slay unarmed opponents. He regarded himself as the embodiment of the great Hercules and appeared in the streets with the lion skin and cub attributes of the god born before him. He slaughtered senators at will and permitted his pampered favorites in the Praetorian Guard to run daily affairs of state as they pleased. He established a large harem for himself, paraded in women's garments, publicly kissed his male favorites, and delighted in inventing degrading punishments for his officials. He even thought of changing the name of Rome to Colonia Commodiana. Maybe that's why it's the commode. Is that why it's the commode? A palace cabal finally got rid of him by causing Commodus's wrestling partner to strangle him. The Senate, which had lived in mortal fear of him, uttered a unanimous and prolonged curse on his memory. He who killed all men, let him be dragged by the book. He who killed young and old, let him be dragged by the book. He who killed men and women. He who set aside wills. He who plundered the living. We were the slaves of slaves. Commodus was evidently unbalanced and had let matters go too far. He was not exceptional in that age in his wanton love of cruelty. The least attractive trait of the Romans was a traditional bloodlust that delighted in witnessing death in the arena and that led, perhaps inescapably, to the murderous excesses of a Nero or a Commodus. Remember that one of the things that Nero did, right, one of the reasons Nero was Nero Ahenobarbus 666, was that Nero had parties where he lit the party by setting on fire crucified Christians. Those were his torches for his parties. At least that's what I think Suetonius says that. Tacitus and Suetonius are the two, the 12 Caesars and the Annals of Imperial Rome. It says, let's see. Gladiatorial shows, duels of armed men against men, as well as wild animals show hungry beasts pitted against each other or faced by men with spears and dogs. Another thing in the movie was that there's a part where the protagonist says, like, we are not slaves. And it's like, yeah, but you are. You literally are. You're gladiators. You literally are. So I don't know how he came to say that in the film, why he would say that. But it didn't make sense in context, and it didn't matter. It didn't work in terms of the arc of the story. He says, whereas 320 pairs of public duelists had fought to the death during the aedileship of Julius Caesar, no less than 5,000 pairs were put in the ring during a festival celebrating a triumph of the Emperor Trajan. Even so calm and civilized a Roman as Pliny the Younger spoke gravely about the necessity of offering gladiatorial displays to the public. The fighters were in large part prisoners of war, condemned criminals, or slaves bought for the purpose of exhibition. There you go. Yet free men sometimes became gladiators for the same reasons that have prompted adventurers in modern times to find refuge in the French Foreign Legion. They joined because they are ruined or desperate or because they want to live the lives of complete dedication and obedience, remote from normal responsibilities. That's true of the French Foreign Legion. I've got the whole stack of French Foreign Legion books up there. The would-be gladiators were placed into schools run by professional trainers who were either employed by the state or working on their own as suppliers of arena manpower. Here's the statue of Commodus, and that's actually in the film. You can see him, though, taking on the garb of Hercules right there. Famous statue. The gladiators' barracks at Pompeii held about 100 men. 63 were in chains at the time of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Gladiatorial games had their own carefully contrived ritual routine. There were prescribed methods of killing and being killed. Some men fought with 2 swords, some with 1, some with a trident and a net. Some were helmeted, some were not. To a gladiator who had fought bravely, there would come the welcome cry from the Colosseum crowd, "Mite, let him go." Those who had fought less bravely heard the roar, "Jugula, throat." According to the accepted routine, the losing gladiator was killed by being stabbed in the throat. Even the way in which he would stretch out his neck was taught him in the schools. Later, Cicero talks about that, and he says that Cato was the ultimate example of that. Because when Cato died, he tried to kill himself, it didn't work, and he stretched out his neck for himself to be S-sided. The losing gladiator was killed by being stabbed in the throat. Later, one of the attendants would come running with a hot poker, prodding him to make sure that he was dead. Under the Emperor Domitian, the last ruler of the Flavian dynasty, the cult of the gladiator had reached a new height of excess. Even women appeared as combatants, and dwarves were made to fight dwarves. In a travesty of state, Domitian's gladiatorial school was provided with rich mosaics and marble columns. The time of the mass persecutions of Christians, when believers were sent into the arena to fight each other or face professional killers and hungry beasts, still lay ahead. But this ultimate savagery was simply the result of a brutalizing process that had begun long before. Members of the Praetorian Guard, the elite of the army, drew 3 times the pay of the legionary and in addition received large handouts or donativa. This led to increasing tension between the Praetorians and the polyglot forces in the provinces, and finally to the overthrow of the Guard when Septimius Severus, who we were just talking about, the general commanding 12 legions in southeastern Europe, marched on Rome after being acclaimed emperor by his troops at Carnuntum, or on the Danube. Reaching the city's gates with a host reinforced along the way, he surrounded and overpowered the Guard. Thereafter, it was no longer recruited from Italy and thoroughly Romanized provinces, but was diluted with foreign elements. Often its men came from the least civilized parts of the empire, and the center of power was moved from an elite army to a mass army. That happened with the French Foreign Legion as well after the OAS tried to overthrow de Gaulle. Intelligent, versed in both Greek and Roman literature, the African-born Severus was nevertheless a soldier through and through, incapable of thinking in any but military means. He had commanded armies in Gaul, Sicily, Pannonia, and Germany, and there was hardly another man in the empire who had so wide a knowledge of military affairs. The government he imposed on Rome was nothing less than a military dictatorship based entirely on the power of his troops. It followed that in order to keep them in hand, very large amounts of money would have to be spent on them and special favors bestowed on them. This led to what was in effect a scheme of mass bribery with resultant burdens on the state. Severus increased the pay of legionaries by almost a third. Great masses were quartered on the land, drawing requisition of foodstuffs, transport, and housing. Finding the treasury nearly empty, he resorted to confiscations to replenish it. Bands of soldiers acting as policemen searched households for political suspects and stripped them of their possessions. Remember, Rome didn't have a police force, as mentioned in Cicero. They didn't have a police force. They didn't need one, but they did have private security and eventually military. But it was one of the reasons for the civil war between Julius Caesar and Pompey was that Caesar was recalled to Rome, but Ilia Iacta Est, right? The die is cast when he crossed the Rubicon into Rome armed. It set off the civil war because you weren't allowed to do that. As he was dying, Severus instructed his sons, be united, enrich the soldiers, and scorn the rest. Let's see. Coming into power in 8211, Caracalla, this is from the movie, a character from the movie. Caracalla followed his father's advice and raised soldiers' pay by another 50%, thereby inflicting a further drain on the state. He declared openly that he was bent on basing his rule on the support not of the traditional upper and middle classes, but of the soldiery, the representatives of the plebs. Arbitrary capital levies were imposed to further undermine the patricians and merchants. In this famous edict of 8212, Caracalla granted Roman citizenship to all free persons living within the empire, which is kind of a Reagan thing, isn't it? But the measure, although seemingly magnanimous, was actually demagogic in its way and in its way oppressive. Once everyone was a citizen, the hitherto cherished concept of Roman citizenship with its rights and rewards for people of Roman or Italian birth lost its meaning and became a mere word, a whisper. As the historian Michael Rostov-Zev has remarked, Caracalla's chief purpose was not so much to raise the lower classes as to degrade the upper. Moreover, admission to citizenship involved the assumption of heavy taxes by all concerned. Now, that is what Emperor Denzel does in the movie, because Denzel states that he was a servant of Marcus Aurelius, and that Marcus Aurelius tells him that the greatest revenge is to be unlike the person who offended you. But that gets mixed up in the film because at first he admires Marcus Aurelius, and then he seeks to be unlike him in terms of his denigration. He wants to destroy Rome, but it's already on the way in terms of its destruction and decadence, and he wants to do exactly what we're talking about Caracalla wanted to do in real life. Certainly he himself looked with favor on this new scheme of extortion, since money was so desperately needed to pay increasing bounties to the soldiers and to buy off barbarian tribes as well. In his brief reign, Caracalla amassed many titles. I'll skip the titles. In love with grandeur, he built the largest baths in Rome and decorated them with unprecedented magnificence. He thought of himself as another Alexander the Great. All the Caesars did. Destined to bring about a marriage between Rome and the East, but he ended as a travesty of Alexander. His most notorious exploit was a massacre of almost a whole generation of young citizens of Alexandria. He himself died at the hands of the guard before he could put down the Parthians. What was left of Roman dignity was mocked by the rule of the next emperor, a mincing, painted boy named Geta. He was raised in Syria as a hereditary priest of the cult of Baal. He found pleasure in dressing in women's clothes and posing as a prostitute. He was fondest for walking on carpets of lilies and roses. According to the historian Herodian, who describes his triumphal progress through Rome amid a rabble of eunuchs and oriental priests, the emperor wore purple silk embroidered with gold. His cheeks were stained scarlet. His eyes were artificially brightened, and pearls hung from his neck. At the time of the Carthaginian Wars, they had acquired the black stone of the Phrygian Great Mother, and during the last century of the Republic, the cult of the Egyptian goddess Isis had flourished even when it was officially proscribed. The Great Mother promised fertility and victory. Isis promised everlasting life. Elaborate and impressive ceremonies attended the worship of the goddesses, and the hymns sung in their honor were far more colorful than the practical pleas addressed to Jupiter. The Eastern mystery religions answered the need of a people thirsting for divine revelation. By the end of the 1st century A.D., Rome was being invaded by a host of divinities from Syria and the neighboring countries, as well as by a dawning belief in Christ the Savior. Thank goodness. The stories about him exceed everything told about Nero, and sometimes they resemble the tales concerning the Caliph al-Rashid centuries later. His couches were made of solid silver. His chariots were studded with jewels and gold. He would only swim in a pool perfumed with saffron or other essences. He strewed showers of roses and other flowers over his banquet hall floors and walked on them. His banquets were sheer fantasies. On one day, everything served was blue in color. The next day, green, and on the following day, iridescent. At dinners, he was partial to tongues of peacocks and nightingales, and on one occasion had heads of 600 ostriches brought in so that their brains could be eaten. He delighted in playing pranks on his courtiers. The cushions on which they sat first inflated, and at a sign the air was let out. When his guests became drunk, he would sometimes have them shut in for the night and then let in some of his tamed lions and bears to awaken them into a state of fright. He offered a prize to the servant who could bring him 1,000 pounds of spider webs. Sometimes after dark, he roamed the streets incognito, slipping gold coins into prostitutes' hands with a whisper, "It is a gift from the emperor." Sometimes he appeared in public on his chariot drawn by 4 huge stags. Oh my gosh, this is crazy, right? The man was evidently mad. Within a few years, Rome wearied of his outrageous presence, and he was murdered in a latrine and thrown into the Tiber. Yet he left a legacy. Within a few decades, the worship of the sun became the official religion of the empire. There you go. So that's it. That's all I'm going to do for that. These are the depraved annals of the descendants of Nero. The stories of Nero are bad enough, right? Nero trying to kill his mom 3 different times. But, we have some good emperors. We have, Trajan, Hadrian, Marcus Aurelius, and a few good emperors. But then, as per usual, with the state of decadence and depravity and having everything, and not having Christianity, they degenerated into absolute hellish behavior. So, that is Gladiator 2, Virgil, and this book. It's a great book again. It's called The Horizon Book of Ancient Rome. It's a great book. I think you can still get a copy. It's not too expensive. It's a great book. And, of course, some selections from a classical literature book. And so, let's check out some of the super chats here, you guys. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you being here for this high IQ book enjoyer, movie enjoyer Saturday night. If you want to support me, don't forget you always can with the links provided. You can hit me up with the PayPal right there, Venmo, Cash App, or you can grab a super chat. You can grab a membership. I've got, again, a lot of streams for the VIP members if you want to check out some of those. We got some good movies coming up, of course. My friend just went and saw an advanced premiere of Nosferatu. So that'll be cool. Yes. I've read before some of my own book of poems, Runes, which is about the third REICH Troubles era, Northern Ireland, and Imperial Rome. So it has a lot. It's a book of personae. It has each of those characters. Some of those characters that we have mentioned tonight, with often first-hand accounts in lyric poems of those. It's a fun book, and I hope to get it published and get it out to you sometime. And I'm working on my 2 books of prose right now. One is pretty much done. That's a book on bad boy rich kids, and then called West Hampton, and the other one is called Monarch, and that's about a serial killer who goes after his programmers. He's a victim of MK Ultra and Mirror Man. How much to sponsor a full Belfast accent for BLA? 100 quid. And so let me get to some of these super chats real quick. Again, you can think about supporting me right here. I will be back with a full analysis of J.G. Ballard's The Drowned World, right here. Great book. J.G. Ballard. We've done a few of his books. I need to do Empire of the Sun, but we've done Crash. We did Cocaine Nights. And J.G. Ballard really fits into the he fits into the great postmodern writers category with Bret Easton Ellis, Cormac McCarthy, and Don DeLeo. That's in my opinion. Very strong writer. So we will see that coming up. Let's look at some of the super chats here. Yo, so thank you to Shaw. We read that one. That was $10 super chat. Thank you so much for that one. Hey, Dacian drops $5.99. Thank you so much. Currently on a mission to binge watch all your streams. You reminded me of how much I used to enjoy artistic literature before I got too jaded. Hey, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate that. And, it's okay. Think about it like this. Everything's against you. Everything's against us. Everything is trying to jade you into total nihilism. And worse, everything is trying to, everything that we face is trying to do that. So I appreciate that you found a waterway back through to beautiful literature. That's, great literature in the canon of literature is not only revelatory and predictive and all that. It is on its very surface, as Coleridge said, the best words in the best order. That's not just poetry. That's poetry and prose. It also provides for what T.S. Eliot says is the landscape of literature, which is the psychosphere. That's the synchro land. That's a way of looking at the world as we see it, as it is, as it was, as we want it to be. But it is great art is always meant to address or answer the two questions that people have always had. The reason that people create art, which is to glorify God, to understand our relationship with God, and to understand how we're supposed to get along with each other while we're here. And even the art, even the nihilistic art, does that through the inverse. It's oftentimes made so that it doesn't do that, but by definition, it does. It's always answering those or trying to answer those questions. So, we cover a lot of movies here, and I love doing movies. And movies provide a visual representation of that, and that's, of course, it's still the dominant media. But the great literature in the canon, go back to some of my streams and watch some of the Shakespearean streams, some of the Renaissance and Jacobean streams. Watch the ones on romantic poetry. On a lot of we've done a lot of poetry here, and we've really covered a big vista in terms of looking at classical literature and modern literature, and we're going to continue to do that. Thank you, Gorilla, for gifting that one membership. Really appreciate that. Let's see if we got any over here. Let's give a shout out to Jason. Thank you so much, Jason, for that $5 PayPal. Really appreciate you. Let's see. Also, thank you for the big sponsored streams super chat. Was this Ranger Walker? Let's see. Yeah, thank you to Ranger Walker for that big, gigantic, big gift, that big PayPal super chat. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much for that. And let's see. I think that might be it. Shouts out to my friend Luke out there, because we're going to do a stream together. My old friend Luke. We're going to do on his channel, my friend Luke, we're going to do an analysis of The Golden Bough, J.G. Frazier's The Golden Bough, which I've talked about from extension with other works, Jesse Weston's From Ritual to Romance, etc. Have I ever read A Canticle for Leibowitz? Yes, I've covered A Canticle for Leibowitz on this channel. That was in the apocalyptic literature and film stream. Yes, thank you for asking. Or seen the movie called The Parallax View. I have covered The Parallax View. I covered Parallax View about 3 months ago with Jay Dyer, our good friend Jay over there. It was here on this channel, so you can check those out. If you've got movie or book recommendations, please drop them in the chat or drop them in the comments right after the stream. Really appreciate it. Thank you for that $5, Gorilla. Really appreciate you. Is that Gorilla Biscuit? I can't see on here. I'm assuming it's Gorilla Biscuits. Is it? Let's see. Can't see. Thank you, Gorilla. Appreciate that. Yeah, we have covered well over 20 of the 37 Shakespearean plays. We've covered Christopher Marlowe, John Webster. We've covered Virgil, a little bit of Homer. We haven't done full Homer yet. We covered John Milton. I think all of the British Romantic poets. We've covered a lot of the modern poets, Sylvia Plath, Ted Hughes, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, done multiple streams on all them. We've even done Yusef Kuminyaka. We've done many Don DeLeo, Cormac McCarthy, Bret Easton Ellis streams. Done a lot of the dystopian literature, post-apocalyptic literature, post-apocalyptic movies, dystopian movies. Coen brothers, done Brad Pitt, Matthew McConaughey movie streams. We've done a lot of stuff here, and we're going to keep going. So coming up, we have J.G. Ballard. I'm also going to be covering Neuromancer. That's for our friend Circle G. That'll be soon. I've covered Snow Crash, so now we'll be doing Neuromancer and some more future tech stuff. And yeah, if you have any more suggestions, please drop them in the chat afterwards. Thank you so much to everybody. If you want to support me, I really would appreciate it. Hey, it's Thanksgiving coming up. I hope everybody, not just the Americans out there, but everybody has a great Thanksgiving. You know, we're giving thanks to God, thanks for each other, and look forward to that. I'll have a nice few days off, and then a couple weeks later, I'll be able to spend some time with my family for Christmas, and I can really use the support so I can come back with a whole new set of books to cover for the new year, especially. Crispy, I haven't covered Spike Milligan. And someone recommended At Swim Two Birds recently, so I need to cover that. But thank you everybody for being here. Really appreciate you. Thanksgiving is this coming Thursday, and I had at least five Thanksgivings in the UK. 3 of those were in Belfast. There was some of the best Thanksgivings I ever had. So that will be fun. Thanksgiving comes from Virginia. It comes from right here, right down the street. Not from up there. But, you know, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. We got nothing to do with Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock down here in Virginia. But, you know, it'll be a good time. Good time. So that's about it for tonight, y'all. If you want to support me, please look at the channel description, the video descriptions. Look in the streams. You can see my links. You can email me at madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com. By the way, we're into the maximalist era. Have you noticed that? We have now moved fully out of minimalism and we're totally into aesthetic maximalism. So we were ahead of the curve on that one. And there's a lot of good music coming out recently. The new All Under Heaven EP is really good. I've been listening to that. I've been listening to, here's what I've been listening to. All Under Heaven, Super Heaven, Tony Braxton, French Touch and Electro, Daniel Avery, Bicep, Belfast, Bicep, Jethro Tull. I've been listening to a lot of Jethro Tull. I always listen to Jethro Tull, especially in the fall, because I love medieval minstrel music. So I have a playlist of those. You can actually go to my SoundCloud, and I have a list on there of Ace of Based music on Digitalia Regalia. That's my SoundCloud. Go to my community tab, like my posts. Thank you to all of our friends and family out there. Peace to every one of you. Let's play some Sting and cut off his new album. And listen, if you supported me and I didn't get to you, I will get to you next time. Thank you. Please go back and I do this so that you don't have to, but also so that you'll read. And I think that people all the time, especially in real life, ask me about, Unbreak My Heart. Yeah, have you ever heard Tony Braxton's let me see if I can't play it on here, which is one of the biggest shames of this. But I mean, just imagine how cool it would be if I could just sit here and just play Tony Braxton all night. Maybe you don't think that's cool, but I do, because I love Tony Braxton. Of course, Charlie XCX. But have you ever heard Long As I Live? You ever heard Long As I Live? Recent Tony Braxton. Great song. What else have I been listening to? Let's see. I've been listening to a lot of Crossfade, Limp Bizkit, Fuel. What else? A lot of late 90s, early 2000s trance. I always listen to that. A lot of Deftones. I always listen to a lot of Deftones. Rex the Dog, that's some good electro. Don Toliver. Let's see. Paul Van Dyke, Drab Majesty, Provoker, Boy Harsher, Boards of Canada, Oasis, of course, Phoenix. I was listening to a lot of Phoenix last week. Did you know that Whitney Houston's debut album, simply titled Whitney, had 4 #1 singles? Yes. So listen, I do this so that you don't have to, but also I get this question a lot about how do I read, or what should I read? I'm not here to promote reading like as an activity necessarily. that's for me, and that's that's beyond. We're beyond that. But I will say that, and this is especially for people who have who have kids in school. They want to know how do they get their children into reading, especially teenagers. And I would say that remember that it's not advice because I don't like that. But I will say this: here's a good thing. You gotta if you especially with boys because I'm a boy, so I know this. So nothing can ever replace a reading, especially to your kids. You all know that. That's obvious. But imagine when you were a kid. I was blessed to have parents who read to me since infancy. Since I was born, my dad always read to me. My mom and dad, but especially my dad read to me. And my dad gave me the things that I like reading, which is history, warfare. Eventually, I made my way into my own type of music and then literature that I read. But the things, especially for a young boy or a young man, I mean, history and warfare and military stuff, he really gave me that. And my dad knows more in terms of history, especially than any person alive. There's no doubt. And so I'm very blessed to have that. But I would say that, the mistake that a lot of people make with trying to get their kids to read, is, or with themselves, is that like they go to the bookstore. It's important to go to a physical bookstore first of all. You can move on to online stuff later and find books that way, but you got to establish a physical library, not just a library of the mind, and also to own books. It's important to own books. Don't just check out books in the library, although that's important. You can do that too, but it's important to hold the physical book. And I think the mistake that people make is that they try to pick books that they should read. They try to pick books that other people have recommended or that they should read or they feel like they need to read. If you don't read, then that's not going to get you into reading. The thing that's going to get you into being a reader or reading is to find books that you want to read. So if you like mob stuff, then find books about the mob. If you like books about crime, read books about crime. If you like sports, don't go to a bookstore and think, well, I shouldn't read a book about sports. Because people do feel that way. They feel like there's some sort of high mark. That doesn't matter. You have to find a book about something that you want to read about. Because all the time that we spend on the internet, which is fine, but all the time that we spend on the internet going down rabbit holes and reading, that is reading. But there's a difference between the physical act of reading without I actually read with distractions. I actually read with loud music and with the TV playing. I can read anywhere, everywhere, all the time. But that's because I do it all the time. That's all I do. So when you do it, you have to people often say, I don't have time to read. You got to make time. It's just like when you were a kid and you realize that if you want something done, you give it to somebody who doesn't have time to do it because they have time management. You just make time to do it. You make time and you do that instead of something else, or you make time to do it. And eventually you find yourself getting into, like if you're reading a novel, what Jack Kerouac says is the holy contour of life. Books have a rhythm and it matches almost to like a circadian rhythm. And you find that you are more fulfilled as a person and you start to, we already think and dream in terms of words. So it makes sense that we would exercise ourselves with words. If you are out of shape, and I'm out of shape, but if you're out of shape, you exercise the muscles, right? Everything, it becomes a sort of muscle memory. Reading is not natural. Like you're interpreting symbols on a page and you have to build stamina to do that. But you have to want to do it. You have to push yourself to want to know more about stuff. You have to get yourself into the habit of being disciplined with that because it's important in terms of the mind. There's nothing mentally that replaces reading. Everything else is presented for you and given for you, and you have no choice but to accept it. TV, movies, cell phone, TikTok, they give you images and it's there and you can't change it. But a book is all imagination land. It's all up to your own interpretation. So that's an important. I mean, it works on a spiritual level for yourself as a human being to understand there's something bigger than you and that you tap into. And I think that that's important because the written word is the great artifact of history. You're reading the thoughts from another person through time directly as they are into your brain. And you don't get a better picture of any other time in if you're reading history than doing that. So it's difficult to read books in English as a second language, and you still struggle with Shakespeare. Hey, struggling with Shakespeare is an admission of an intellectual pursuit that is admirable, because most people don't get to a level where they struggle with anything. Struggle and hardship creates life. It creates a positive impact on us. And, I can't tell you the number of times. I mean, it's for one thing, just on a basic level, it's satisfying to hear a phrase and then immediately open a book and see the phrase. Like earlier today, I thought of the word Thrace, and then I mentioned the word Thrace tonight, Thrace and Thracian. It's just, you just know, you become a noticer, right? And we've all been noticers. We've been noticing things for many years. Christian says moving books sucks. I'll never move because of all my books. Yeah, look, trust me, I've dealt with the same exact thing. I hate moving, and that is the biggest impediment to moving is all the books. But think about how great it is when you walk into a person's house and they have books. Not to be like pedantic about it, not to be a snob or anything, and that's, but it's different from like if you're a student and you're younger and you're in your 20s and you go to a dorm room and they've got books from school or they don't have anything on the walls but posters. That's fine. It's, that's whatever you can have, and a lot of times, like when we're getting older, like when we're moving or before you get married or whatever, you put things in your parents' house and you put things away. But when you eventually find your home, it is comforting to have things around you that are not just IKEA. That's the classical sign of a learned man is books. And that's not just something to behold visually, but something where you can, when I read book, if I think of a passage and I open a book, I can go to the page because I can see the page in my mind where I read the book. It's also important to date your books. You should date the books. Date your book. And when you're done with the book, look, when you're done with the book, you see what I do here? This is what I do when I finish a book. You see up in the corner, I put my initials and I put the date. And then right here, I put lists of phrases and words on the frontispiece or on the title page that I got from the book. Now that's you don't have to do all that. I mean, I do active reading, so I'm giving back to the page. That's why I don't take notes on things, because the notes are already ingrained in my mind from the book. I take notes, I annotate the pages. So I don't write them over again usually, but if you can get one word that's important that means something from a book, then mission accomplished. So that's my update on the importance of reading. It's important. It's important stuff. That's one of the whole points of the channel. The reason I started in the first place is because all of these media people and all these elites allude to things, and they quote people, and it's often misquoted or they are in the wrong context. So it's important to go back to the source. Like with this movie, I went back to the source of, there you go, with Caracalla. So it's important to do those things. They inform our spiritual opinions, our understanding of the world and of the word, right? And in the beginning was the word, right? Thank God. So that's about all I got tonight, you guys. Thank you. Again, you can reach out to me and all those things if you want to support me. I would appreciate it. And go see the movies, go read books. I'll get to you as with new things that come out. And let's hear Sting. Want to hear Sting and a cut off his new? I'm out of breath just from doing all that. That's pretty pathetic. But I'm giving it a lot. I'm giving it a lot here, people. Here you go. Here's Rooks G, Up and Down. Take it away. Thanks to everybody for being here tonight. Really appreciate you, each and every one of you. Please make sure you've subbed. If you haven't subbed to my channel, hit that like button, leave a comment. Go rewatch my old streams. Thanks to everybody who's newly coming in, everybody old who's been here for a while. And listen, was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it if you're strong enough. Love y'all. Adios. Adios, amigo.